Soldiers who fought against the US, what was it like? Story 1. My grandfather was conscripted to fight for the North Korean military during the Korean War. He was at the Battle of Incheon, and he likened the dread that he felt to what you must feel when faced with a massive tidal wave that is about to engulf you and everyone you know. Couple this with the fact that many North Korean troops were told horror stories that the American troops were cannibals, for example, and that the average American Marine was much taller and more physically robust than the average North Korean soldier. You can imagine how scared he was. He said that the Chinese and North Korean units were absolutely obliterated and that they never stood a chance against the Marines. My uncle, who I will be seeing in a week for Thanksgiving, was there. He's 86 now. He still will not talk about it. His kids did not know that he was in Korea until they were in their mid to late 20s. I remember when I was little, he would mow the lawn without a shirt and I could see the scars on his abdomen. When I asked him about them, he said that they were from having his appendix taken out. Clearly not the case, as an adult looking back on it. To this day, he is a staunch pacifist. This is much akin to the horror stories told in Japan after America dropped the atomic bombs, that American troops were savages who were going to come into Japan and rape all the women. That is why there was such a high suicide rate in Japan in the months after the war. Terrifying stuff. This is true. My grandfather tells me stories about Korea. He is a US Marine. He tells me about how easy it was to just mow through any resistance ever. I condensed this part. The only thing he said that ever scared him over there was waking to an earthquake. My great-uncle was a bulldozer operator during the Korean War, making roads to the front lines. When he got shot at, and bullets started bouncing off the metal, he defied his orders to stay with the bulldozer no matter what. He promptly exclaimed, "Screw that bulldozer," to his CO or whomever. He ended up being badly wounded by a landmine. Took off a great deal of his side and hip thigh that his friend stepped on. Someone finding bodies of dead Marines found him in a ditch and claimed he was dead. He managed to get out, "I'm not dead yet." He ended up dying last year of lung cancer. He was one of the coolest guys I knew. It was always great to hear him talk about his experiences in the Korean War. My grandfather served 20 years in the Italian military. He was an MP, a paratrooper, and everything in between. That's what he'd always say anyway. He served on the front lines during World War II, although he was mostly in Africa fighting the British. After the war, he never liked the British. He would tell us they were dirty and never wore underwear, not sure if that was true or not. He never had anything bad to say about the Americans, however. Also, Mussolini was a school teacher, a good man. Story 2. I'm an American soldier, so I'm not what you're looking for, but I'm guessing you won't find much on here. So I'll give you an analogy from some evasion training I got when getting ready for less visible operations. We were learning how to escape if you're being chased, and one of the things we trained for was trackers using dogs. The dog handlers explained it like this. Look, the dogs we use are so good at what they do, so perceptive that they will find you. You won't be able to fool that dog, so you need to fool the handler, travel in erratic patterns, backtrack, make it seem to the handler that the dog has lost the scent and is just wandering. You can't beat the dog, but you might be able to beat the man. This is what fighting the US military is like. If the man behind the dog has decided you're the enemy, you've already lost. There are many brave fighters out there, on our side and against us, but when it comes down to it, we are going to win in direct fight. Sure, bad things happen and we lose a battle here and there, but in a war, we will win. The trouble is that the world is learning. No one wants to fight us in a war anymore. They don't go after the dog, they go after the man behind the dog, jack up the cost of the conflict, cause civilian casualties, force us into lose-lose situations, and our support crumbles. Then our handlers say, "Okay boy, we're not finding him today. Let's go home." My father was a career Marine. I grew up hearing about Vietnam and what other engagements he could talk about. He always said that was one of his biggest fears. They realized they could not beat the military, so they started to go after the civilians, the innocents, and those who were unable to defend themselves. I watched it start happening in the Middle East growing up. All the terrorists bombing first embassies, which are technically military viable targets because they represent the US on that country's soil, then airplanes, and then worse, and 9/11 happened. My father and others of his ilk always said I signed up to fight and defend so others wouldn't have to, and now the cowards are going after the innocents. It's so sad that in the Quran, one of the biggest sins is to harm a non-combatant, and it is very clear what a non-combatant is. Any children. No exceptions. Women and men who are not in the military, i.e. civilians. You do not hurt them. Anyways, my 2 cents and much, much more. If I were fighting the US military, I would think needing a diaper in the field kit would be a good idea, though I hope peace can be achieved without violence. Interesting, though, that the wars the Americans have fought and their families have never been endangered, always safely tucked away on another continent, while the soldiers fight a war where the family of the enemy is. I wonder if the American army would hold together if a war was brought to their homes. Would the soldiers stay in the army and keep fighting if they had no idea if their families were dead or alive? If I were a leader of an army fighting the US, I would focus on landing as many personnel in the US to cause havoc and destruction. Will the US Army survive without the constant supplies from home? Story 3. I was just a 7-year-old kid when my parents were watching CNN/BBC while I was playing video games. It was about some army jets taking off during the night. My dad turned to me and said, "It's begun, get to the basement now." Sometime later, the first explosions could be heard. The NATO/US bombing of Serbia in '99 had started. I remember spending time in the basement with other residents. I remember how the building shook when the bombs exploded. The fear of what was coming after the sirens went off. They destroyed all 3 bridges across my city, cutting us off from a part of our family. One day, a bomb hit the refinery, so we couldn't stay in the basements anymore because of CO2. Then a bomb hit about 100 meters from our building, and shrapnel went through the blinds and windows and embedded itself into the opposite wall of our neighbor's flat. That was when we decided to move somewhere where the Americans had nothing to aim for, a smaller town. We were safer there, but we could still hear the jets flying above us and bombs going off in the distance. When someone shot down the F-117 stealth jet, it was a huge hell yeah moment for Serbia. That's my short story of surviving a war versus USA. Governments routinely build key military targets in heavily populated areas in order to ensure civilian casualties, so that they can point out the barbarism of the other side. If you don't like your government using you as a human shield, vote or overthrow it. The US can't win, intervene, and you get stay out of our business. Don't intervene and you get, how can you let this go on and do nothing? One of my professors was an undergrad in Serbia during the war. A major government building in Belgrade was hit, and the whole house shook violently like an earthquake. It was a very old stone building that collapsed. Shit was crazy. She and a professor of hers tried to spend the time the university got bombed a few times, trying to make some rudimentary communication device that the Serbian soldiers could use. I met my wife a few months before this started. Her parents came to the US from Yugoslavia in the 60s. Her mother was born in Kosovo and lived in Vernic Cabania, phonetic spelling. She has degrees in law and chemistry from US colleges. When she told me that it would be like a US state trying to secede and get help from Russia, I felt betrayed by our media and government. The patriotism I had always felt for the US died a little that day. On a lighter note, whenever one of our kids has a meltdown now, it's referred to as a crisis in Kosovo. I have a friend who grew up in Pristina who has a very different perspective on all that. He tells stories about how he and his buddy would run up to the roof of their apartment building and drink by the light of the flares that lit up the city as they guided the aircraft to their targets, both of them standing up and cheering with every explosion. The roar of those jets overhead, he said, was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. I have similar experiences. I was in Kosovo during the war and would hide in the basement when Serbian helicopters were over our village. Our house was eventually burned to the ground by Serbian forces and we had to leave or die. I also remember that night that the NATO/US bombing started because it only made the Serbian forces more violent and aggressive, because they knew they didn't have much time to get rid of Albanians. The KLA must have felt pretty overwhelmed by the Serbian military. AKs against helicopters and tanks. Everyone was having the same horrible experiences, although I doubt you got any family members massacred during the war like many Albanians did. Story 4. Sebastian Junger very briefly touches on this in War. He writes at length about how incredibly terrifying and physically transforming it is to be in combat for American soldiers. Given all that, Junger then asks one of the American soldiers what it must be like for a Taliban combatant to face off against an Apache helicopter, and the soldier pretty much just shudders. I was camping in the desert with some friends, and at night a cobra, I think, flew over the hill and just hovered over our camp really low. The sound the props made was so violent, it was like cracks, not a steadier hum like the Seahawks. Just the prop sound alone was enough to scare the crap out of me. But then I saw the gigantic gun underneath move to point at us, and I just froze. This was years ago, and it still stands out in my mind as one of the scariest experiences of my life. I can't possibly imagine what it is like to hear those props in the distance, knowing that they are coming to gun you down. I saw him move his head to look at us, and that's when the gun moved. We had a campfire in the middle of nowhere. It was a legit campsite, though. He probably just saw the fire and just wanted to check out what was going on in a way. That was why it was so unnerving. Some guy is casually flying around and sees something interesting, so he goes and checks it out, and then goes on his way. Meanwhile, on the receiving end, we get a deafening roar, dust pickup, and a gun threatening us with immediate death. It makes you feel completely helpless and insignificant. The American Army of the Second World War, largely conscripted, poorly trained when compared to many German formations, and relatively inexperienced when compared to soldiers who had served on the Eastern Front, is in no way comparable to the professional, highly trained modern army. The US Army in Europe in World War II relied on a massive superiority in artillery and air power. Essentially, they were byproducts of America's massive industrial advantage over the Germans. This made up for gaps in training, experience, and daring between the Germans and the Americans, but it also eventually made American soldiers hesitant to engage in heavy combat. Or more hesitant than they already were. They often preferred to wait until the artillery could be arranged to pound the Germans for a while before they'd attack. It'd be more useful to compare the experience of German soldiers who faced a small number of well-trained American divisions, like the airborne divisions. I'm not sure the Germans who participated in the siege of Bastogne would have the same opinions. Yeah, well, I think it's incredibly terrifying and physically transforming to be in combat/war against any country. That's kind of obvious. Of course, the US has more equipment than others, but you get the point. I don't know, I think I'd rather fight ground troops than what is essentially a mechanical flying, fire-breathing monster. An Apache is like a huge buzzing insect that spits death everywhere. It's virtually unkillable with an AK-47, and you can't really hide from it once it sees you. It's terrifying to even think about fighting an Apache, and the only people who seem to be able to repeatedly stand up to one are people obsessed with martyrdom, like the Taliban. Bring on the other guys walking around with piddling little assault rifles. I've got one of those. I don't want to fight a giant metal insect. There are books in Urdu and Pashto that interviewed a lot of fighters from the 80s in the Russian War. I read one that focused on religious fighters. They were zealots. Their fear wasn't an obstacle. They felt at peace the closer to death they were. It's not to say they're immune from psychological disorders, but I have a feeling they channel it into more effective means of war, rather than drop out and become suicidal, as happens with American personnel. Then again, it's hard to really compare. What culture do they have to return to after the war? Their culture has already been transformed by war. It's hard to tell PTSD in an individual apart from an entire populace that is suffering from it. The Afghans stared down countless Soviet aircraft and armor. They try to take a chopper out with knives if they could. Hell, Palestinian kids are driven so crazy they throw rocks at tanks, even when they know there's still a good chance the tank might fire back. They try to remove fear during training for military personnel, but some war-torn cultures have the entire population's idea of fear altered. This is unfortunate because human biology and psychology doesn't change, and the civilians and children really suffer for having to go through what trained American soldiers have a hard time grappling with. But those children became cold-hardened and grew up and picked up an AK-47 to fight the next generation of first worlders out of their element. Story 5. In World War II, the Germans and some of our allies often commented on how chaotic the US Army appeared to be. I believe the quote was, "War is chaos, and the American Army practices it on a daily basis." Other armies were slow, disciplined, methodical, etc. The perception was that Americans were unpredictable and undisciplined but prone to ingenuity. Not just our generals, but right down to the grunt soldier level. I understand most who fought us viewed this as a great strength. I remember reading an article a while back that one of the reasons Americans were so unpredictable to Europeans was the fact that we were one of the first national armies to use guerrilla tactics. We literally got a master class fighting the various Native American wars. This is exactly why we won the Revolutionary War. Well, that and the French. Eventually, we realized that lining up and shooting gallery style across a field from a bunch of British soldiers lined up the same way wasn't getting us anywhere. Mainly because they had strength in numbers, so we started doing shit like hiding in trees and bushes and behind cover. The British had no contingency plan for an enemy army behaving like this. We broke the rules of warfare because we realized the rules of warfare were stupid. The way it was traditionally done ensured a complete all-out slaughter on both sides until a few beat-up soldiers on one side remained alive to claim victory. Then we pieced together that taking cover significantly reduced your odds of being shot. The Revolutionary War was actually won in that stupid style of combat, which was actually pretty damn efficient for fighting in open spaces. And it couldn't have been won in any other way. Sure, you can retreat into woodland and survive, but people who think that's how we won the war are simply ignorant of history. The cities were mostly surrounded by cleared forest, open space. If you can't control open space, you lose the cities. You don't control the cities, you lost the war. If you want to control open space in those times, you form battle lines and fire muskets at your opponents. My grandfather was an infantryman in World War II. His division was on the front line destroying German bunkers. I was reading a recount of their exploits, and a lot of times the environment was not suitable to continue. The COs would not stop the division from advancing because the men were so determined to complete their objective that stopping them would be a blow to their morale. I think they wanted to justify the loss of their fellow soldiers by completing their objectives. This must have been terrifying to the German soldiers who faced them. I imagine a German soldier seeing the skies give way to floodwaters that stopped tanks, and thinking, surely God is with us now, giving us a brief respite from the Americans. The Americans still advanced, spitting in the face of Mother Nature to kill their enemies. Nothing would stop them, and the Germans knew this. It's not quite chaotic, but it's close. I've been in the army for 23 years and have seen firsthand just how we guarantee victory in almost every situation. Operations planning. We plan meticulously and we plan to utterly annihilate whatever enemy we are facing in combat. I just recently participated in a 7-day exercise in South Korea, the planning for which began 3 months before the event took place. Every facet of an operation is considered, weighed, evaluated, and planned for, from tactical formations to ammunition expenditure, to civilian consequences, to casualty evacuation, to field mess, and so on. Ad infinitum. We participate in working groups according to our specialty, which contributes to the overall plan according to a process called the military decision-making process. This in-depth planning process is a planning model which establishes procedures for analyzing a mission, developing, analyzing, and comparing courses of action against criteria of success and each other, selecting the optimum course of action and producing a plan or order. It is a process that never stops until the operation is ended, and even then you are probably balls deep in the planning or execution of another operation that spurred off of your current one. It is so flexible that as the situation changes, we are constantly ready to drop whatever we are working on and pick up something new. We try not to get emotionally attached to any aspect of the plan because something you have been working on for months could become irrelevant at any time. If it happens, you just drop it all, make a new pot of coffee, pick up your pen, and start fresh. It's not unreasonable to work 14 to 16-hour days during operations or exercises. In Iraq, which was a continual never-ending planning process, we worked 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week. For our entire tour, they still do so in Afghanistan. There was always something to plan for. If you think this slows us down, you're wrong. When a crisis occurs during an operation, an abbreviated decision-making process occurs to deal with it. We already know what the most likely and most dangerous enemy course of action will probably be, and subplans and operations orders have already been drafted. This process draws upon the planning done prior to the operation and allows for quick thinking and reaction by our combat forces. This is the reason our staff elements are so large and cumbersome. The brain power applied to planning by our staff allows our combat forces to focus on the fighting, with reasonable assurance that the potential plans of the enemy they are facing have already been dissected, accounted for, and prepared for. It's not even fair. which is the whole point. Our planning and contingency processes, combined with the efficiency of our internal communications, a whole separate language exists within Armed Forces staff, our intelligence sensors, and the lethality of our combat arms branches assures tactical and operational victory whatever enemy we are facing. We crush whatever is in our path with meticulous planning, thorough training, and overwhelming firepower. When the US does suffer a defeat, such as the Battle of Kamdesh in 2009, it is because of a breakdown in this planning effort. Strategic defeats, however, are a different story. Battles and campaigns are won or lost through military planning. Wars are won or lost through geopolitical gaming by elected leaders or despots. If I were part of a military unit or group which came to understand that we were going to face the US military, I would probably shit my pants. Before I was even to see the first US plane in the sky, my actions and the actions of all echelons of command above me had been predicted, dissected, and planned for. If I hadn't deserted before US forces were on the ground, I would already be dead. I just wouldn't know it yet. Story 6. Hopefully this won't get buried, but my hopes are not too high. My father was a sniper during the bombardment in Yugoslavia, and my best friend's father was a member of the elite unit called Tigers, while the war in Kosovo was raging. I'll be short because I have to sleep, but my father told me it was like trying to repel a wave on the beach by building a sandcastle out of sand. You fought, you may have won some small encounters, be it by accident or pure luck, but you always knew that if they wanted, they could just kill all of us and be done with it. It was not a nice time for Yugoslavia, that's for sure. I was in Kosovo during the war. My sister almost got killed by a Serbian sniper. Like I said in another comment, that's how the KLA felt against the Serbian military. I don't think it was as bad as the US, but Serbia was fighting farmers with AK-47s. My dad was never with us, and I was scared I would never see him again. Some of my cousins died fighting, others never returned from prison camps. We would hear horrible stories about Serbian soldiers and how they were animals. When we were marching across the border into Macedonia, some of the soldiers would give us food and tell us that they were sorry for what we were going through. It was surreal, and we didn't trust them. We actually threw the food away because we thought it was poisoned, even though we were starving. Now I realize that they were just trying to stop the suffering, I guess. Yugoslavia may have been bad, but it was nothing compared to the time in Kosovo during the war. Story 7. I am actually a former US Army. I spent an entire summer serving as an OPFOR, opposing force, at one of the Army's elite training centers. Basically, I fought US soldiers in a giant simulation. I'd actually agree to some extent with the pushover comments for some units. The US Army is just so damn massive, some units certainly will look completely incompetent. Also, outside of a few SOF units and light infantry, there isn't a whole lot of emphasis placed on toughness. However, combat arms units are no fucking joke. We have the best, most expensive training in the world, and by far the best equipment. I would not want to be on the other team. Chances are I'd be dead before I even saw an American soldier. Another former US Army OPFOR soldier here, I spent 6 years doing this. Though, not 6 months. I worked in Germany, so I not only got to work with the US, but most of the European NATO forces in some capacity over the 6 years. Most of my work was with mechanized forces, but I was light infantry by trade. It wasn't often that we got to do light infantry work, but I would do as many recon missions as I could to get out of the tin box that we had to run around in. Now keep in mind I was there in the mid to late 90s and things like experience have changed a lot since then with all the deployments the military has seen over the years. Back then we would primarily work with units stationed in Europe. They had a huge disadvantage. They were in our backyard. They didn't get field time like we did. We averaged 300 plus days a year in the field, so they were not as skilled as us. Most of the units in Europe didn't have many training facilities other than once or twice a year they came to work with us. Units in the US, I feel, would put up a little better fight. At times, we would work with special operations units, SOF, Rangers and such, and as you would expect, there was a night and day difference. They had better equipment, were better motivated, and had larger training budgets. This made them a tougher fight, but I will leave it at that. A lot of the time, the political side of things would step in. This would happen when other people may be watching, or things would happen remotely because we were doing a little too good. I lost count of how many times a general would step in and cancel an artillery strike that I called in because it would take out too many of his people. At first, I would get pissed, but later I realized that by denying my strike, they would get to continue to fight a little longer, and maybe get a little more training out of it rather than having to sit on the sidelines and watch, because I took them out right as they crossed the start line. As for other countries that I worked with, while we were in Germany, we didn't fight the Germans very often. We would train with them, and there were a couple of units that would come out in the field with us. It was rare that we would actually fight them. When they would come to our training facility, they would bring 2 units and fight each other typically. Since they had to pay the US to train at our facility to include all our fuel, ammo, and such, they realized they could better spend their money by training 2 of their units at the same time by fighting each other. When Kosovo was going on, we did a run German unit that was deploying through the process, and they were shocked that they got wiped out so quickly. I am talking quickly like we took an armored battalion in about 25 seconds. From first contact to being combat ineffective. Then they brought in their top armored battalion to fight us, and while they did a little better, they still didn't stand much of a chance. The Brits we would work with once a year usually, it was expensive to bring them to Germany, so it wasn't very often. They were pretty good. I would rate them a little better than the US forces that were stationed in Germany, and likely on par with the US stated US forces. Probably the country that we would train the most was the Dutch Army. They were on a trip. You could really see where the difference is between an all-volunteer military and one that has conscripts. We would like to work with them as it was something different, and we would get a good laugh about things that they would do. We'll never forget when I was the track commander as we were on an attack. Here is the Dutch truck coming down the road. It stops, backs up a couple of feet, and stops again. The next thing I see is all the occupants jumping out and running for their lives. They just left the truck in the middle of the road. Completely agree. I was on an OPFOR team in the Air Force. Here are some of the highlights. Broke onto an active Air Force base on foot, made it to the flight line and placed explosives on several planes before walking right up to security to be taken into custody and letting them know how badly they had failed. All this occurred after base security had been informed the base would be attacked that night, assaulted and overran a secured command post. The colonel was not happy when we came into his room with M16s, woke him up and took him captive. Heard the folks in the motor pool were getting uppity because we hadn't dared take them on. We raided them at 3 a.m. and were able to disable nearly half their vehicles before the last of our team was taken out. During one raid where I and 2 other team members were captured, one of the security forces guys was really pleased with himself that they had caught us after we had infiltrated the flight line and compromised several aircraft, and asked, "What do you guys normally do? Are you special forces or something?" Story 8. While I cannot speak from experience, I am an American. I can relay something my father mentioned to me a few years ago. He was a Marine during the conflict in Grenada, and he was also active duty during the First Gulf War. He has never gone into great detail about his combat history, and frankly, I wouldn't want him to have to relive those memories. But he did mention one time how you can see a man's fear before you see him. Kind of cryptic, I know, but that one statement says a lot. He mentioned how you could hear them yelling, and that the yells were not the confident kind. He meant that these men knew they were about to fight Americans with all their fancy toys and extreme training. They knew that the Marines were coming to kill them. My dad always told me that one of the greatest weapons our military has is the image that we conjure in the minds of our enemies. While it is one thing to fight someone who you feel is an equal or lesser match to you, it is completely different a scenario to fight someone who you truly feel is a monstrous force of war. I can't speak for the other branches strictly because I don't have a close personal relationship with someone who is enlisted, and I have never enlisted. However, I can tell you that my father and all his Marine buddies are absolutely vicious if prodded into an aggressive situation. Story 9. My great-grandfather talked to me about being a Canadian in World War II. When a Canadian plane flew overhead, the Germans dove for cover. When a German plane flew overhead, the Canadians dove for cover. When an American plane flew overhead, everybody dove for cover. Story 10. My dad was an anti-aircraft gunner in Hanoi during the Vietnam War. He still wakes up screaming in the middle of the night often, really. My dad did basic training in Vietnam before he managed to escape, but as a kid, I remember him telling me stories about how fucked up everything was during wartime. He was in his 20s when it was all going down, but he remembers walking through a field with his friends, and in a split second, several of them blew up from a landmine. Another story he told me that sticks to me to this day was when some of his friends went out drinking the night before they were supposed to enlist. Sitting around a table completely hammered, singing songs and trying to forget about the terrible things they may have to encounter. One of the friends dropped a grenade underneath and ended it all before the hell even began. Story 11. My great-uncle fought on the German side of World War II. He fought all over the place: Africa, Italy, and a small stint in Russia, and he defended France from the D-Day invasion. He was later able to move to the United States as a war refugee. He said that all of his officers would constantly tell him, when you're fighting the Americans, you must think of the least probable way they will attack you, because that will be the way that they will attack you. He also said that when you were fighting Americans more so than any other country's army he fought, you had to have eyes on the back of your head. Story 12. Both of my grandfathers were on the German side during World War II. They didn't say much about the Americans until after the war, and how helpful they were rebuilding Germany and donating chocolate to kids and etc. But both sets of grandparents told horror stories about facing the Russians. Seems they were pissed at the scorched earth they had to do to defeat the German push and made them pay dearly and daily. They emigrated to the US because they ran so far west, getting as far away from the Russians as possible. Story 13. My great-uncle was on the Italian side of World War II and was a captured POW to America. From what he told me, people wanted to be captured by the US. They were treated badly on their own, and they heard how great America was. Who had the biggest fall from grace in history? Philippe Pétain was a national hero of France after World War I. He won the 9-month Battle of Verdun as a general and inspired hope and optimism at a time when it seemed like the war would never end. Fast forward to World War II and he became the head of the state of Vichy France and was a puppet for the Nazis. He ran Vichy state in a semi-fascist manner and constantly sought to appease the Nazis to preserve Vichy's limited freedoms, including signing anti-Semitic ordinances and allowing deportation to concentration camps. At the end of the war, he was convicted of treason on all counts and originally sentenced to death before being reduced to life imprisonment by Charles de Gaulle on account of Pétain's advanced age and service during World War I. De Gaulle would later summarize Pétain's life as successfully banal, then glorious, then deplorable, but never mediocre. And also, the Marshal is a great man who died in 1925. The trouble is, he didn't know it. China had a similar person. Wang Jingwei was beloved for his role in the 1911 revolution, but is now viewed terribly for siding with the Japanese in World War II. His fate was different though. He died in 1944 from a wound he got from an assassination attempt in 1939. The ROC army destroyed his tomb and his burial place now has a note that calls him a traitor. Icarus. Well, if we're going there, I would argue Lucifer Morningstar. Winner. Pretty sure it's the origin of the phrase fall from grace. Benedict Arnold, hero general of the American Revolution, one of George Washington's best assets, felt slighted and overlooked by his contemporaries. Switched sides to the British made no difference to the war effort, died in disgrace in England. His name is now a synonym for traitor. Since this is getting some attention, for anyone interested in learning about the man, I highly recommend watching Benedict Arnold: A Question of Honor, a TV movie from 2003 starring Alden Quinn as Arnold and Kelsey Grammer as Washington. If Ethan Allen didn't screw him over after Saratoga, he would have risen much higher. I'm sure it didn't help that his wife favored the British. I still believe if he was patient just a little while longer, he would have gotten recognized and became a potentially positive player in early American history. Harvey Weinstein. He was Hollywood when he got outed for the POS he is, but this guy produced the Lord of the Rings trilogy, every Tarantino movie except Hollywood, and Good Will Hunting, and subsequently, about every Damon or Affleck project from that time to his downfall. He's won more Oscars than any person could ever dream of and has made more money off films than maybe anyone ever. That guy, oh man, I think he fell the furthest, the hardest, and the fastest. Well deserved though. Well freaking deserved. Roses are red, violets are glorious. Don't try to surprise Oscar Pistorius. My son's high school played rugby against Oscar's old high school. Whenever anyone went into the team toilets, they'd call out, "I'm on the loo, don't shoot me." Small interesting aside, Elon Musk also attended Oscar's high school years before. Fritz Haber. A German chemist and Nobel Prize winner, he helped pioneer the Haber process for synthesizing ammonia. This is important because it was a key ingredient in artificial fertilizer. His actions enabled the world to feed itself and unlocked the chemistry behind allowing us to grow food that outstrips the consumption of humanity. In the 1990s, he figured out the chemistry behind allowing us to make sure no one died of famine ever again. Providing we put in the input, it was now possible to feed the world thanks to him, and he laid the groundwork for further developments at a time when much of the world was still illiterate and ruled by kings. He has saved countless lives from hunger, untold millions, unlocking a piece of science that changed the face of organic chemistry forever. Then came the First World War. If he were a sorcerer, it would be as if he turned to the darkest of arts. After saving the world and gifting such innovation to humanity, he then turned his mind to destroy it. He invented chemical warfare, designed chemical weapons from scratch, unleashed chlorine gas, and founded an entire dark science that bore the weight to sarin, phosphorus, chlorine, and other unholy weapons of war used by war criminals and tyrants for the next century. He led brigades devoted to chemical war, recruited other renowned scientists to his cause, and turned the science most devoted to the creation and change for the betterment of humanity into another weapon. I'm a chemist. This science is the most used and visible and strikes a balance between raw universal forces and physical applications. It is nothing short of the engineering of reality, shaping the universe like clay in our hands, and he used it to kill on an industrial scale, and thanks to him there will be no going back. In my mind, he is the greatest fall from grace, from one of humanity's greatest to one of its most forsaken. Jared Fogle. OJ has to be up there. By the time I was a child, Bill Cosby was so universally recognized as an icon of wholesome comedy that one of the most popular kids shows of my youth was literally just a cartoon about his childhood. Now the legacy of that little cartoon show is tainted by the very subject of the show itself. That's a fall from grace. From being trusted to be a part of your kid's formative years to becoming one of the vilest and most disliked men of all time. I don't know how I didn't realize that Little Bill was by Cosby until right now. Guess I just never paid enough attention. That's quite a stain on my childhood now. He was never the biggest star, but Mark Solling's fall from grace was massive. Went from being the star of a primetime show to being charged with child XXX and dead in a matter of months. On that note, Allison Mack went from the actress of the breakout character on a long-running popular superhero show to a cult leader who trafficked women, blackmailed them, branded them, and tortured them. There's also Grace Park, one of the stars of Battlestar Galactica and Hawaii Five-0, who was part of that cult too. I think she left though. One of her co-stars was and is still a big part of it though, and actually married Mac. Nikki Klein was Callie on BSG. Robespierre. His actual death was brutal. For those who don't know, he tried to kill himself but was stopped and ended up only blowing his own jaw off. He then was kept alive all night with a massive facial injury until he was beheaded in the morning. Just before he was beheaded, the executioner ripped the bandages off his face, and only the guillotine blade silenced his screams, one of the major events that stand out during the French Revolution for me. Aaron Burr. He was Vice President of the United States when he shot and killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. The duel killed Burr's political career. He was dropped from Thomas Jefferson's ticket in the 1804 election, and he couldn't even win an election for governor of New York. In 1805, Burr plotted to invade Spanish territories and create his own empire, with a side plot to incite a revolution against the United States. In 1807, Burr was put on trial for treason, and he narrowly escaped a conviction. I'm sure there are worse people, but Harvey Weinstein went from being one of the most powerful people in the world to being completely reviled and losing everything. This is the guy who had Meryl Streep and Oprah on speed dial and married a woman 1,000 times too attractive for him. He now uses a walker and has lost his fortune and his reputation. And his genitalia is literally rotting off. In case you didn't know, several of the women who accused him of sexual misconduct all pointed out that he really wasn't interested in sex per se. He just wanted massages. According to some, his hygiene was so poor, he developed an infection in his peen, which then rotted the flesh after being left untreated. He basically got gangrene on his genitals and was effectively impotent. Lance Armstrong. Not just the drug thing either. He went to insane lengths to silence people trying to expose the drug scandal within the cycling sphere. He threatened people and publicly harassed and embarrassed people, Even former Tour de France winners weren't safe from his wrath. He was invincible and used it to bludgeon people's careers, reputations, and personal lives. Not the biggest, but Armie Hammer casually outing himself as a cannibal was pretty big. There's a docuseries about it called House of Hammer. Benedict Arnold would be celebrated as the second most important founding father after George Washington, if not for, well, you know. America loses the Battle of Saratoga without him. Saratoga was what convinced the French that we were serious about overthrowing the British. French assistance likely doesn't happen unless we win at Saratoga. Independence was possible without the French, but we'll never know the outcome without them. Kevin Spacey was once my favorite actor, but now I can't look at him the same in any of his works. Rudy Giuliani. The Four Seasons thing still makes me laugh. Hard to believe what he's like now after 9/11. Did he ever have a soul? I honestly think the Four Seasons thing is the funniest thing that has ever happened. It's literally the quintessential example of cringe humor. You can't write something funnier than that. Jeffrey Epstein went from rubbing elbows with world royals and the wealthiest elites of the world to hanging himself in prison all alone. I guess you could say his elitist friends left him hanging. Lance Armstrong's reputation craps the bed pretty enthusiastically. The bracelets didn't help. Hitler was actually praised by world leaders at the time of his rise. I forget what controversy brought him down, though. He broke the Molotov-Ribbentrop neutrality pact with the Soviet Union. Crassus, one of the richest men alive in Roman history and one of the three triumvirates with Caesar and Pompey. Then he died by liquid gold being poured down his throat. He did not fall from grace, he was merely soundly beaten by the Parthian Empire. Mark Antony and Marcus Lepidus, on the other hand, both fell from grace once or twice respectively. Mark Antony fell from the grace of Caesar when he returned from his ruinous Egypt campaign, only to find Antony doing God knows what with Rome, and once again he fell out of grace of the Senate when the donations of Alexandria became widely known. Lepidus was merely pushed out of power by Antony and Octavian. Henry VIII has to be up there. He was a famously handsome, pious, and noble young king, very in love with Catherine when they were married, and over time, he became the wife-killing tyrant we know today. Not the farthest, but Phil Spector is worth a dishonorary mention. Vladimir Putin, once thought as a shady but politically savvy and strong leader of a decently powerful nation with one of the strongest militaries in the world, but is now known as an incompetent, greedy asshole leading a country that has gone into a massive economic recession that also has a joke of a military that anything above a literal third world despotic regime could beat with ease. Same. I thought his past experience in KGB and how well he consolidated his political power, plus the fact that he took Crimea with ease, would mean he had a rather unbeatable plan for Ukraine. Turns out that sending 30-year-old tech without a supply line or even ground troops was somehow supposed to capture an entire country. Even with the now revealed to be poorly maintained machines, they could have planned this so much better. NATO was skeptical Ukraine would make it out alive and was preparing to create a border with Russia from outside until they too realized that Putin really didn't know what he was doing. Napoleon went from being emperor and having control over half of Europe to being exiled to a tiny island. Of course he came back, but it was short-lived and he got exiled again to an even more remote island. Napoleon's legacy as a brilliant military tactician survived into recorded history, and his Napoleonic Code became the basis of law in much of Europe. I'd say that even if he fell from grace in his lifetime, his historical legacy was legendary, much like Julius Caesar. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. Fatty Arbuckle was an insanely popular silent movie star and had a contract in 1918 for $3 million for 3 years of films, equal to $54 million in 2021 dollars. According to Wikipedia, an unheard of amount. In 1921, he had a party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco over the course of several days. Virginia Rapp ended up dying, possibly from a ruptured bladder. She, or friends, there seem to be different versions, which is a problem with the story, accused Arbuckle of raping her. The newspapers went nuts, making up stories and spreading what little they had. Arbuckle had multiple trials but was ultimately acquitted. He was dropped by the studios. Hollywood reacted by hiring Will Hayes and forming a censor board. Many of Arbuckle's films are lost because distributors and theaters would not play them. This is probably the only person I have seen on this post that was probably an innocent man. He was accused of raping Virginia by a woman who, by many accounts, was a prolific blackmailer and what appears to be the predecessor of Rupert Murdoch in the media who sensationalized it. After the third trial, which took minutes to acquit, the jury apologized to Arbuckle, saying an injustice had been done. Fred Phelps started his career as a celebrated civil rights lawyer in Kansas, followed up by Brown versus Board of Education 20 years later, and ended up forcing them to implement more fair educational conditions for students of color. Went on to form the Westboro Baptist Church, which became one of the most despicable hate groups in the US, notorious for their homophobia and protesting at military funerals. That church was one of the most reviled hate groups in the 90s and the 2000s. Milli Vanilli. Michael Vick is one of the big athletes I usually think of that's not the obvious ones like OJ. One of my favorite subtly horrifying jokes in BoJack Horseman was Mr. Peanut Butter talking about Vick approaching him to work on something. This may be off topic, but the African National Congress went from being the first democratically elected party in South Africa, the beacon of freedom that ended apartheid, to now being the fattest, leech-filled government on the continent. State capture, the biggest presidential cabinet in the world, all making hundreds and thousands of rands a month trying to figure out new ways to finesse citizens, through tax levies, corruption, nepotism, tenders, and selling off the country through loans that they'll never be able to pay back. It's sad being young in this country because I'm watching my friends and I kill ourselves with how much we drink and do drugs because there isn't anything better to do. Shocking unemployment rates, especially amongst the youth who fall into traps like booze and drugs because they are stuck at home, as educated as some are. Others drop out in high school through pregnancy, circumstance, or dumb crap. But if the ANC delivered on half the crap they promised since '94, then I truly believe we'd be in a better place. Nowhere near the first world, but emerging economy status. This will be the worst fall from grace because the damage done cannot be fixed. Will it get better? Maybe 2 generations from now, but the world is messed up already, and I'll be dead then. So yeah, I don't think it gets a lot worse than that. Joe Pa was just such a failure from top to bottom too. Paterno literally did what he was required to, but had so much influence he should have done more. The chief didn't investigate Sandusky before because they were neighbors and went to church together. The FBI shut down an investigation in the 90s on him. Just years of complete utter failure. Andrew Cuomo has got to be up there. He was a huge media darling during COVID, wrote a book about how well he did, and was being floated as a presidential candidate. Then the sexual harassment and handling of nursing homes made him fall almost overnight. John Wilkes Booth. This needs to be higher. He was a well-respected member of a family of actors. Then he killed Lincoln and basically sent the civil rights movement back 100 years single-handedly out of a delusion that he could somehow save the Confederacy when they had already surrendered. I don't think it's possible to have a worse fall from grace than that. Aung San Suu Kyi won a Nobel Peace Prize, freeing her country from the grip of military rule. Then years later used that military power to oppress the Rohingya Muslims. And now she's in prison because the military didn't think she was sucking up to them enough. Christopher Columbus, revered by Americans for literally centuries for discovering America. Turns out he was actually a genocidal monster, and the recent revelation of his legacy has taken him from intrepid explorer to whom we gratefully owe our existence as a nation, to that guy didn't discover crap and he killed millions of people. To hell with that guy. John Edwards ran for VP, getting ready to run for prez. Then everyone finds out he had an affair and a kid while his wife was dying of cancer. Ian Watkins from the band Lost Prophets. There are a lot of singers and musicians who fell from grace, but I don't think any of the other ones could be worse than this. Bernie Madoff. Not to be the religious guy in the room, but Judas comes to mind. Dude was so trusted by the apostles that they made him their treasurer, and he betrayed them and Jesus, ultimately killing himself in guilt and forever being remembered for and associated with betrayal. Hansi Cronje, post-apartheid cricket captain in South Africa. He united a divided nation through so many sports victories. In 2000, however, he was found guilty of match fixing. He died mysteriously in a plane crash in 2002, soon after being exposed. R. Kelly, obviously. Jeffrey Jones, aka the dad from Beetlejuice, aka the principal from Ferris Bueller. Also, the king in Amadeus. man, I did not know. In 2002, Jones was arrested for possession of child pornography and accused by a 17-year-old boy of solicitation to pose for nude photographs. He pleaded no contest to a charge of soliciting a minor, as the accuser was 14 when the offense first occurred. Jared from Subway. Jim Baker. LOL. I grew up where he was sent to prison. My mom saw Tammy in Kmart buying a boatload of makeup. Benioff and Weiss. Jebediah Springfield. This beloved patriot and big into the smallest spirit. It was later learned he was nothing but a marauder. He was said to have a silver tongue. The trouble is, he wasn't a great orator, just a guy with a silver prosthetic, which he earned by having his tongue bitten out in a bar fight. Most will still defend his cromulent history. Michael Jackson is definitely up there. Tremendous rising child star, an illustrious career, spinning into countless accusations of differing magnitudes into his untimely end. Moses goes from being a prince of Egypt, ultra-privileged, to being broke and wandering the desert for 40 years. Sam Bankman-Fried's fall has been both impressive and sudden. The story isn't nearly over, but that was one hell of a Ponzi scheme he created. I listened to news updates on Google Home, and I think it's Reuters that's sponsored by EY, and they always have some expert from their firm dole out a tiny amount of advice as a baited hook. Until last week, they were saying how employees wanted their organizations to engage in crypto, a weird claim in itself, and how they were experts and ready to help. Suddenly, they ain't running that intro any longer. Kanye West. In my lifetime, I'll kind of go in order. First off, OJ. This would be legit like if Tom Brady was accused of double homicide. He had been out of the league for some time, but he was still a major name in the sports world and media. He was the spokesman for Hertz for like 25 years. He was in movies and Monday Night Football. This was a crazy major deal. Then he lost it all. He seems to still be doing okay for the most part. He still owes Goldman $25 million or something. He hasn't paid a dime. Jared Fogle. I legit still remember the commercials. He was a big deal. A lot of people bought into his diet. Lance Armstrong. This one was crazy. I remember everyone rooted for him. Everyone and their mother had Livestrong bracelets. He was truly a major inspiration to overcome adversity, then bam, gone overnight. I think a lot of people look at Bill Clinton very differently now. Bill Cosby. Enough said. Britney Spears. 2007 was wild. Now that she's free, boy does she still look like she's doing pretty rough. I feel bad for her. Will Smith destroyed his entire image in the span of 45 seconds. Shows how fake he is. Rudy Giuliani. He was crazy popular after 9/11. Hot take, Trump had solid PR up until he started doing his birther movement around 2011. A lot of people might forget The Apprentice was a crazy popular show. He did Domino's commercials, he would fill in for Regis and Kelly all the time when Regis was out. Yes, young people, there was a time when he was legit actually liked. Michael Jackson's image has really taken a hit in the last 5 to 6 years. Kevin Spacey was arguably at the tip-top peak of his career when the Me Too movement toppled him. He was doing anything and everything around then. Now he's gone. Not the biggest, but I think Ellen's fall from grace was well-deserved, seeing as she is a massive piece of crap. I don't know about had, but Elon Musk is doing a pretty stellar job trying to speedrun this one. Ryan, aka Temp, that guy couldn't handle corporate life. Richard Nixon. The Marquis de Lafayette. He was a military officer during the American Revolutionary War and a close confidant of George Washington. He was then one of the leading members of the Estates General and helped draft the Declaration of Man and the Citizen, with help from Thomas Jefferson, after which he became Commander-in-Chief of the National Guard. Then came the Champ-de-Mars massacre, which cost him a lot of clout and popularity. Not long after, he was forced to flee and go into exile, where he was captured and spent years in prison. During the rule of Bonaparte, he kept himself largely in the background. Then, as his last act of note, he gave his support to Louis Philippe, who even during Lafayette's lifetime turned away from the promises he made to Lafayette. At one stage, during the two major revolutions of the 18th century, Lafayette was in the inner circle of power, but by the end of his life he was despised by many of his countrymen and forgotten by many Americans. Saddam Hussein. Marie Antoinette went from being Queen of France to getting her head cut off by her own people. I would say that wins. She was Austrian and never really accepted by the French. Elon Musk. I feel like he went from the people's hero to now everybody thinks he's an ignorant asshole. J.K. Rowling went from beloved, inspiring, and ludicrously successful to so reviled that even people she made famous can't stand her and publicly denounce her. And it was all so unnecessary. All she had to do was retire and have a great time while sitting on a huge mountain of money. Happy life, great legacy, and inspiration to a whole generation were in her grasp, and she dropped it all in the garbage. Nebraska football. Definitely not the biggest one, but Milli Vanilli should be in the conversation. Is Kanye too recent for history? In modern history, W went from a 99% approval rating from his own party to the point that no one on the right will admit to voting for him. Way late to the party, but I'd say Zuckerberg, from connecting the world to enabling genocides and messing up elections. General Robert E. Lee. He was the United States' best general before the U.S. Civil War, but he betrayed our country and sided with Virginia and the Southern slaveholders. He helped perpetuate one of the vilest wars ever fought. Then his ego and hubris got in his way, and just when the South might have been able to force secession to be recognized, he smashed his army at Gettysburg, and the South was running from there on out. Arlington National Cemetery was placed on Lee's home at Arlington just to shame him for his treason. All those dead men are buried on the plantation of a general who swore to have loved his soldiers, who were trained at West Point to serve the United States. I love the stupid narrative the South has about the War of Northern Aggression, after they seceded and they fired the first shots, all so they could continue to own 4 million people as slaves. And if it wasn't about slavery and white supremacy, why did they write it into their Constitution? Jefferson Davis deserved to have been hanged, preferably from a sour apple tree. Southerners were lucky. In plenty of countries and times, every last one would have been wiped out. Lee surrendered and faded away, but then racists started celebrating like he was some mastermind. He lost. You don't build statues of losers. Steven Seagal. Steven Seagal never was that great. His movie career only took off due to his mafia connection, and he was always an asshole. His own mother once called him out on his bullcrap because he kept lying about his past even before he was famous. Christopher Columbus is a big one of late, from the brave discoverer of the Americas to a very hated figure for his extremely cruel actions. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the posthumous leader of East Pakistan, leading to the creation of the independent nation Bangladesh through a bloody war in 1971, stayed in West Pakistan prison the whole time while his followers and the people fought through the war. He came back to independent Bangladesh in January of 1972 and became the first prime minister with the unanimous support of the whole nation, created a paramilitary force to be run by his sons and the ones close to him, abducted, tortured, and killed as many of the political opponents, especially the ones who helped him rise to the top, as he could, closed all newspapers except the ones run by the government, and banned all other political parties except the ones he owned, declared himself the prime minister for life. Billions of dollars of foreign aid destined to help the people of the war-torn country just disappeared, caused the first famine in independent Bangladesh in 1974 through massive corruption, looting, smuggling, and mismanagement of his family members and the leaders of his circle. The nation had basically become their family enterprise. Some military officials organized a coup in August of 1975, killing him and every single family member they could find. 2 daughters living in the UK survived. One of them is the current prime minister. On that very day, millions of people came out in the streets rejoicing the good riddance. Charlie Sheen. Not a lot of female names on here, so I'm gonna say Tonya Harding, US champion figure skater, but then tried to 86 Nancy Kerrigan's knees, and is now a joke. Ticketmaster's currently working on it. For my fellow Canadian CBC head, Gian Gomeshi. Since I just watched the documentary, I would say Jimmy Savile had a hard fall. Liz Truss, the UK Prime Minister who was only 45 days in office. During this period, she has cost the UK taxpayers an estimated £30 billion sterlings. That is PS 666 million per day in the office. The actual damage may even be higher when you include the damage she has done to individual households. Think about it. PS 666 million per day. One wonders why she isn't in prison. Mel Gibson. It won't be of historical proportions, but Brett Favre has recently gone from everybody's favorite football player to radioactive. Amber Heard. Ellen DeGeneres. Was there anyone who tried to warn us about something that happened, but we didn't listen? Who? In 2005, Courtney Love was asked what advice she'd give to young up-and-coming actresses. She said, "If Harvey Weinstein invites you to a private party at his Four Seasons hotel room, don't go." And for whatever reason, you didn't see her in many movies after that. Didn't Cameron Diaz also make a similar statement on a talk show? It was well known that Weinstein was a creep. It just wasn't well known how much of a creep he really was. Whitney Cummings also joked about it in a roast once, and there was a 30 Rock joke also making fun of Weinstein. It's like how everyone knew that Kevin Spacey was gay and liked younger guys, but no one knew the full extent. French General Ferdinand Foch reportedly called the Treaty of Versailles a 20-year armistice, i.e. not conducive to lasting peace. World War II broke out approximately 20 years later. Ignaz Semmelweis is often described as the father of hand-washing. In the 1800s, he discovered that infant maternal mortality could be drastically reduced by doctors washing their hands between patients. He was largely ignored, and his book got absolutely slated. This is supposed to have contributed to him having a mental breakdown, and he died in a psychiatric hospital. Not just between patients, between working on cadavers and delivering babies. Rick Rescorla, director of corporate security for Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, published a report in 1990 detailing the vulnerability of the World Trade Center parking garage. He and a colleague found that they were able to freely walk into the garage, which contained many structural support columns, unchallenged by any security. Additionally, no ID checks or screening was done on any of the entering delivery trucks. 3 years later, a truck bomb was driven into the garage and detonated in an attempt to damage the structure of the building. Later, he and a same colleague would correctly predict the next attack on the building would come from the air. The evacuation plan and drills he put in place are credited with saving over 2,600 lives on September 11th. Rick died helping people get out on 9/11. One of the last people to see him said, "You need to get out too." He said something like, "I will," but he didn't make it. I worked for Morgan Stanley then, but in Houston. I had colleagues in the towers that day, including my best friend. Watching the towers fall on TV, we thought there was no way everyone made it out, but all my local people made it out. Of 3,800 MS employees at World Trade, just 13 perished thanks to crazy luck and Rick. He's a goddamn hero. I'll never forget him. President George Washington, in his address when leaving office, he warned against the danger of a two-party system in future politics. He felt that several parties on equal footing would be better, especially in presidential elections. The more legitimate choices, the better. Eisenhower and the military-industrial complex, too. Pearl Jam warned us about Ticketmaster years ago. Nobody listened, and now we're stuck with them, and only them. The sad thing is, when I bought my tickets to see Pearl Jam at Hyde Park in July via Ticketmaster, I'm sure someone can explain this much better than I can, but I think Pearl Jam has something in their contract with Ticketmaster that makes it so scalpers can't buy their tickets. They couldn't change Ticketmaster as a whole, but they at least made things a little better for their own fans. I have a foreboding of an America in my children's or grandchildren's time, when the United States is a service and information economy, when nearly all the manufacturing industries have slipped away to other countries, when awesome technological powers are in the hands of a very few and no one representing the public interest can even grasp the issues, when the people have lost the ability to set their own agendas or knowledgeably question those in authority, when clutching our crystals and nervously consulting our horoscopes, our critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true, we slide, almost without noticing, back into superstition and darkness. The dumbing down of America is most evident in the slow decay of substantive content in the enormously influential media. The 30-second sound bites, now down to 10 seconds or less, lowest common denominator programming, credulous presentations on pseudoscience and superstition, but especially a kind of celebration of ignorance. Carl Sagan. How prescient. I work in broadcast media, and the number of commercial breaks created/stuffed into a program to cover all the sales inventory and promos is crazy. I think we've really created a sort of ADHD in the whole country with this style of TV. Those 30-second sound bites, as he calls them, it's such a big part of the business now, it'll never change. Attention spans adjusted. Now it's all about 15-second TikTok videos. In another 10 years, where will we be? Watching 10-minute videos on YouTube, 2007 era, is what I grew up on. Now it's all about 10-second videos. Even on Reddit, r/videos was a prominent front-page sub in 2011, but now it doesn't see the light of day. It's increasingly about sensational clickbait and gut reactions. It was bad in 2011, and it's so much worse now. 12 TRW engineers resigned their positions the morning of the Challenger incident in protest against risking the flight. NASA launched anyway. Should have listened. I genuinely did not know this, but it puts the tragedy in an entirely different light for me. I highly recommend listening to the You're Wrong About podcast episode about the Challenger. Maybe it was because I was in Florida when it happened, but it was a huge deal in our school system. I watched live as a 4th grader. Basically, it was quite preventable, and they went the duct tape and cardboard route instead of quality and safety. Line a few coffins, line a few pockets. H.G. Wells said he wanted his epitaph to be, "I told you so, you damned fools." In The Land Ironclads, 1903, he wrote about a stalemated war fought by trench warfare that was broken by the invention of tanks, predicting what would happen in World War I. In The War in the Air, 1907, he predicted how airplanes would be used in war, including aerial bombardment of cities, and saw his predictions come true in World War II. Harry Markopolos notified the SEC 3 times that whatever Bernie Madoff was doing wasn't legit and should be investigated, and all 3 times he was ignored. He talks about it in his book No One Would Listen. Check it out if you want to see a real facepalm example of government incompetence. Bismarck warned the ruling German monarch of his time that Germany's status in Europe and the relative peace of the continent would only last a short time. After his forced resignation, Bismarck said, "Jena came 20 years after the death of Frederick the Great. The crash will come 20 years after my departure if things go on like this." 20 years later, Germany lost World War I and almost collapsed. Harry Markopolos. He figured out what Madoff was up to, and the SEC still blew him off for years, presumably because the proof he was presenting required math to understand. Harry's motivations really spoke to me. His boss said, "Hey, I need you to invent a financial product exactly like the one that this Madoff character is selling. He is taking a lot of our customers." Harry went on to use math to prove it was either one of 2 things. Front-running, where if you are a market maker and you have a list of orders from your clients, you can sneak your orders in just before, since you know it will change the price right after. This does not scale to the levels Madoff was claiming as profits to his clients, but at the time, it was considered an option. They did not know how much he was claiming he was profiting across all his investors. The second possibility was just a straight-up Ponzi scheme. He told his boss it was not mathematically possible to do what Madoff was doing, and the boss blew him off because he thought Harry just didn't want to work hard enough to make a similar product to what Madoff was doing. The guy uncovered the largest fraud in history to stop his boss from asking him to do an impossible task. Every single junior officer working in Afghanistan for the last 20 years universally called the ANA a worthless POS army and their government a hollow dead money pit. I came home so disillusioned, it seemed like we took warlords and called them governors and said, "Yay democracy!" The media contributed a lot to the lie too. I was in Afghanistan doing light reconnaissance with the Air Force during the 2014 elections. We were basically bouncing from one TIC to the next all over the country until we ran out of gas and had to come home. Get back to BAF and check the news to see the right-wing, left-wing, and even neutral media touting the Afghan elections as a huge success and that they went off without a hitch. It wasn't just the junior officers. Any troop that went to Afghanistan after the mid-2000s knew that we were fighting a losing battle. It didn't matter if we stayed there for 20 more years or 200 more years, it was going to go back to how it was before we got there. You don't change Afghanistan. While not to the degree that it ended up being, but Eddie Murphy took a shot at Bill Cosby's holier-than-thou attitude in his comedy special Raw in 1987 during the height of The Cosby Show. Hannibal Buress, the stand-up comedian, had a joke in his act that talked about Bill Cosby years before it really came out. It was an open secret in the stand-up community. That was no joke. He stopped for a moment and just told the truth. Seth MacFarlane has made fun of sleazy people in Hollywood for years before the Me Too movement. "Help! I've just escaped Kevin Spacey's house!" said Stewie, running naked through a crowd of people. Spacey's basement, but yes, I remember that one too. In college, this was like in '92, my Muslim roommate and I were watching something on TV about Osama bin Laden, and he said, "This guy is determined to accomplish an attack on American soil, and it's going to happen in the next 10 years. At the time, I thought he was crazy. That would be a death sentence for anyone. I told him I'd give him all the money in my bank account if that ever happened. I was so sure. Yeah, we all should have been listening to the warning signs back then. Didn't the US intelligence basically know it was coming but screw up with acting on it?" The US Department of Homeland Security was founded after 9/11 because several different agencies collectively had the information that could have stopped the attack, but they didn't work together or communicate effectively. David Attenborough and I don't think we are listening. Well, certainly not doing enough. Oil and coal companies are both spending a lot of money convincing people through their politicians that climate change is a hoax and spending a lot of money to prepare for the ramifications of climate change. The financial crisis that was given by economist Anna Schwartz in 2005. She warned that a housing bubble was developing and that it would lead to financial crisis, but her warnings were largely ignored. Johnny Rotten attempting to warn people about Jimmy Savile. Cassandra of Troy was pretty spot on about that wooden horse. Cassandra had the gift of accurately predicting the future, and the curse that no one would believe her. You've got to admire the sheer level of spite and imagination that the Greek gods could muster. Jason Salemi, an epidemiologist at USF. No one knows him. That's cool. I was working on medical ML research, glioblastoma at the time, and was asked to help analyze some data about a new virus in China. In the middle of January, we had a research meeting and Dr. Salemi said, "I don't like this one. I have a bad feeling about SARS-CoV, as it was then called." On Feb 2020, I was put full-time on the SARS-CoV-2 team. The rest is history. People thought he was being an alarmist. We had recently been through a pair of Ebola outbreaks in Africa, a couple of bad flu seasons, etc. People thought it would blow over. I remember when the news first started breaking of a new virus in China. I saw a post on here where a guy was saying that based on the limited data at the time, it was possible it could become a global pandemic, and the post was downvoted and called fear-mongering. Sinead O'Connor. Then we called her crazy and mocked her for 2 decades. Lots of experts warned about the FTX fraud. The writing was on the wall. Idiots chose to ignore the red flags and made huge investments. Common people were lured in by the perceived trust. There are people, like me, screaming that Tether is exactly the same and it's still freaking there with the better part of 100 billion in assets. Tether is not backed with real assets, and when it explodes, crypto will be in some real big crap. TLC warned us about chasing waterfalls, but based on my Instagram feed, I swear it's fallen on deaf ears. Tried to tell my mom she was sick 5 years ago. Miss you, Mom. Same. Had her convinced to go to the hospital on Wednesday. Sister talked her out of it. Thursday she went, but had to leave due to sitting so long in the waiting room, she suffered from chronic pain. Friday, her home nurse ignored the fact that she couldn't get blood pressure to register, that she was confused, and that her skin was turning yellow. Saturday I got home. I had left Wednesday night for business, and she was in the hospital. I sat with her until I had to go home to leave Sunday morning. She died that Sunday from sepsis due to an untreated UTI that moved to her kidney and then her blood. Billy Mitchell. He predicted a Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in the 1920s and warned the Navy that they needed to spend more money on air defenses and less on ships. The guy who predicted the levees would collapse in a strong hurricane. Category 2 or 3, not 5 as they predicted. He knew the tide surges would destroy New Orleans and predicted it would be down to 1% of deaths, damage, destruction, and water damage. No one believed him, and he had a computer simulation and printouts he tried to show Congress, and tried to tell them to prepare for the worst, including tents for shelter. He was laughed at and later fired, 2 years before Katrina. To secede from the Union and set up another government would cause war. If you go to war with the United States, you will never conquer her, as she has the money and the men. If she does not whip you with the guns, powder, and steel, she will starve you to death. It will take the flower of the country, the young men. Sam Houston, who fought vigorously against the secession, and as governor of Texas at the time, was thrown out of office, and another pro-Confederate governor was installed by the legislature in 1861. Fellow citizens, in the name of your rights and liberties which I believe have been trampled on, I refuse to take this oath. In the name of the nationality of Texas which has been betrayed by the convention, I refuse to take this oath. In the name of the Constitution of Texas, I refuse to take this oath. In the name of my own conscience and manhood, which this convention would degrade by dragging me before it to pander to the malice of my enemies, I refuse to take this oath. I deny the power of this convention to speak for Texas. I protest against all the acts and doings of this convention, and I declare them null and void. He was a very conflicted person with some of the highest highs in American history, while at other times dredging up some of the lowest lows, usually entirely due to his own failings and weaknesses. Saint and sinner all in one. They were building a big baseball stadium in Wisconsin, and it was a considerably windy day. The crane operator was tasked with lifting a large structure but refused, stating dangerous gusts. The site foreman dismissed the crane operator and called in one who would do the job with no pushback, while the crane tipped over with a load, and the workers were killed. Foreman and second operator were arrested, and the first operator won a wrongful termination lawsuit. Climate activists have been warning us for quite some time, and I think we as a collective will be looked down on from future generations for not doing enough. Just a thought. Al Gore is still basically the butt of a joke after all this time. South Park actually apologized to him by running an episode where the threat of Man-Bear Pig proved to be very real. UK here. Repeated warnings from anyone and everyone that knew what they were talking about that Brexit was a bad idea. And oh look, it's massively hurting in multiple areas, and a majority of people now think it was a bad idea. The guy in the viral video who said, "Leave Britney alone." George Carlin was basically a prophet about a lot of what he says. Carlin was super insightful about human nature, just like The Simpsons. My gut tried to warn my stupid ass about working with the people I'm working with on my bachelor's thesis. The project got terminated today, and now I have to do it again alone, as my gut told me I should have just done it from the beginning. Edward R. Murrow warned us about the dangers of the television medium being used mainly for entertainment, and how this would lead to an ill-informed population. There is usually some warning that a person is going to commit a mass shooting. I swear almost every time that crap happens, it comes out later that the shooter was known to the FBI. Isaac Asimov in 1980. There is a cult of ignorance in the United States, and there always has been. The strain of anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, natured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. One of NASA's engineers warned them that Challenger would explode due to frozen O-rings. They ignored him and launched anyway. That Chinese doctor in Wuhan is the first that comes to mind. Mitt Romney warned that Russia was the enemy of peace. He was laughed at by both Republicans and Democrats. I came here specifically to find this comment. Mitt Romney was right about a lot of things, most notably this one. He correctly identified that Russia has a strategic interest in pushing back against the West and trying to revive the old Soviet Empire, and that Putin would be willing to do almost anything to that end. Romney was ridiculed, but he was a visionary who was able to see what so many others didn't want to at the time. Michael Moore and many on the left warned that Hillary would lose to Trump. Mothman warned about the bridge collapse. In 2002, I heard Scott Ritter, former chief weapons inspector for the UN, explicitly say there are no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, but we seem to be invading them anyway soon, and he was 100% right. Corey Feldman was on The View or something and tried to tell people that Hollywood is full of predators, and the hosts just laughed at him and tried to make him feel guilty about outing them. John Kenneth Galbraith. I haven't read his book, The Affluent Society, but from what I've heard, some of the warnings laid out about the direction of US society were largely on point and still relevant today. He foreshadows the environment movement and the culture around frivolous consumption and argues that there is a severe lack of investment in people. Bear in mind, this was back in the late 50s. Alice Stewart, in 1958, discovered the link between X-rays of pregnant women and childhood cancer. She discovered that cancer mortality was around 40% higher in the children who had been X-rayed in the womb. Her findings were considered unsound for another 25 years until after her formal retirement, when they were reviewed due to her continuing to push the issue. It wasn't until the 1980s that X-rays of pregnant women stopped being commonplace. I cannot find the clip, but about a year ago, at a crypto conference, a guy went on stage and publicly said that FTX was a huge fraud and we would all see. Lots of people knew that Brexit was a stupid idea, but they were ignored, and surprise, surprise, it's a crap show. Bill Hicks warned us about Bush Jr. and the war in the Middle East. Then he died shortly after. Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex taking over politics, and we didn't listen. Now military and mega-corporations have completely taken over every aspect of politics. This question reminds me of Al Gore. He was kicking up a fuss about climate change for years. He even made an appearance on South Park regarding it. Now people are actually realizing he might have had a point. Ted Kaczynski in his manifesto. Besides all of the violence and killings, what's outlined in industrial society and its future is pretty bang on. Smart guy who definitely took the wrong approach. Burry tried warning everyone about the housing bubble in '08. Coincidentally enough, he's currently warning everyone about the coming financial collapse, and the same amount of people are listening. Edward Snowden with the NSA. The public didn't care because they A. didn't understand, and B. weren't suffering any direct consequences. If you took a straw poll of people you meet in your everyday life, I'd bet that most people couldn't even accurately describe what Snowden did and why it's important. Dolphins. So long, and thanks for all the fish. People aren't going to like this answer, but 2 entire generations have tried warning the youth for decades about social media. They were told that they were wrong and that they were just jealous because they were old. Well, here we are. Science has concluded social media is 100% rotting our brains and destroying our attention spans. The boomers were right about it from the get-go. What? Boomers have been corrupted by social media as much as any 2 other groups combined. Greg Lehman said in an interview after a race with Lance Armstrong, "If that isn't doping, then Lance is the best in the world." Well, Lance took offense to that, so he completely ruined Greg's career. Trek canceled their endorsement of him and conveniently went straight to Lance. Lance Armstrong is a piece of crap. Hillary Clinton. She's literally on video explaining step by step what would happen if Trump lost the election. She was 100% correct. Don't forget Adam Schiff and Jamie Raskin. During the first impeachment, they both spelled out exactly what Trump would do if he wasn't held accountable for trying to extort the Ukrainian president. They both said he would never honor the results of the 2020 election, and Michael Cohen, who said Trump would do anything to stay in office if he lost. Eisenhower in 1961. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists, and it will persist. Snowden told us how the NSA surveillance programs are targeted at US citizens and no one cared. The year before the Grenfell Tower fire that killed 72 people in the block, Edward Daffarn warned in an online post, "It is a truly terrifying thought, but the Grenfell Action Group firmly believe that only a catastrophic event will expose the ineptitude and incompetence of our landlord, the KCTMO, and bring an end to the dangerous living conditions and neglect of health and safety legislation that they inflict on their tenants and leaseholders." The hard truth is that Trump tried to warn us about the immediate downturn in our economy and massive inflation if Joe Blow ever took office. Inflation is normal, but the type that you are experiencing now is definitely not normal. Just look at the publicly available information and you'll see for yourself. You may not like mean tweets, secure borders, and cheap gas, but Trump was right. We now have Biden inflation, and that sucks. Are you really going to blame Biden on worldwide inflation? James Lovelock came up with the concept of Gaia, Mother Earth, being one big connected system. Told us we were messing up the planet in the 60s. Fascinating guy. Literally a freelance inventor just coming up with stuff in his shed. I read an interview of him maybe 10 years ago, and he said, "Game's up, too late. Make hay, we're all fricked," which I sadly agree with. Richard M. Stallman. He's been telling us since 1990 that relying on proprietary software for our devices will lead to inscrutable mass surveillance, loss of understanding of our tools, and removing the ability for anyone to learn to program. Few people listened, and even those people didn't take it very seriously. Now the majority of people under 20 don't even own a computer and do everything on their phone. Tablets, DRM checking hardware chips, and other no-user serviceable parts within tools are replacing general-purpose user-controlled computers, and the future of computing over the next generation looks incredibly grim. Idiocracy, directed by Mike Judge, seems to become truer each year. My wife wrote a paper in 2008 warning about the threat of a global pandemic through a novel coronavirus. That paper has now been cited over 700 times. Jimmy Carter tried to warn people about materialism and the seeming need for more stuff while he was president. Politics overshadowed this message, though. Ludwig von Mises warned us about the negative consequences of surrendering power to the governments. It was even before the First World War and the expansion of communism, and we didn't listen. Martha Mitchell warned everyone that Nixon was a crook before the Watergate story broke. Didn't see anyone mention this, but remember when Romney ran against Obama and said the Russians were the biggest threat to American democracy since the USSR and the Cold War? Obama made fun of him for it to a whole conference of people who laughed along with him. Then Russia invaded Crimea. The very next presidential election in the US saw unprecedented levels of media manipulation coming from, you guessed it, Russian troll farms. Then we learned that Russia basically bankrolls the GOP, and everyone forgot about that real quick. Now they're trying to start a war with NATO, already at war with the only state separating the two powers. Mitt Romney was spot on. Russia was the bad guy we were looking for. The Simpsons, about literally everything. John McCain warning the US in 2007 of Russian aggression and that we needed to stomp them. He was criticized at the time for being a Cold War warmonger. I mean, he was, but he was also right on with that one. Trump warned Germany not to depend on Russian electricity and was laughed at. It's kind of different than what you mean, but on the 24th of December 2004, I woke up having the worst nightmare I'd ever had in my life. In the dream, a lot of people were drowning and I was trying to save them, but I couldn't. I was so panicked and overwhelmed, when I woke up I was actually crying and sweating. My parents had to run over to the couch to wake me up from my dream. Apparently I'd been saying, "Move! Run!" but I didn't remember why. I couldn't shake this horrible feeling for hours and hours, like a sense of deep dread, until finally I moved on with my day. Less than 30 hours later, the Boxing Day tsunami hit where my cousin and her then BF were vacationing. Luckily, she survived because she was high up enough in her hotel. I've never had anything like that happen before or after. Lars Ulrich. We were all angry at the whole Napster thing, but he insisted that this sort of behavior would result in music no longer holding value for people. Since streaming is a thing, most people will think of music as a commodity, not a product. Now people don't buy albums, let alone listen to them. He was right all along, and we weren't ready to understand his concern. What did the pandemic ruin more than we realize? I'm not sure if anyone else feels the same way, but my perception of time hasn't really returned back to normal since then. It ruined me on traffic. For one glorious year, as an essential worker, I had the roads almost entirely to myself. It was beautiful. Grocery shopping at 2 a.m. was the best thing ever. Now I have to shop with the rest of you hooligans, and it fricking sucks. I work the second shift, getting off at 11 p.m. Used to do all my shopping after work, but now everything is closed by the time I get off and I have to do all my shopping during the day. I hate it so much. Used to be plenty of options to grab a quick bite to eat on the way home as well. Half the time, even McDonald's is closed by the time I leave work nowadays. Nothing being 24 hours anymore is awful. Night shift people's lives. Nothing is ever open late anymore. My perception of money. I worked so hard to pay off debt, save up for a new house, and get promotions. Now with the rise of housing costs and inflation, I feel like money is literally such a made-up thing, and I have no control over anything, even with all the right decisions. I feel like everyone is more bitter now, like we all saw through the sham of society. Time feels different now. Things just feel off compared to pre-2020. When my country went into lockdown, I was free to continue working and traffic was essentially non-existent. As soon as lockdowns finished, it seemed as though there was a huge increase in the aggression on the road. The price of eating out. Fast food is now almost the same price as a cheap sit-down restaurant pre-COVID. It's often cheaper to go to a fast, casual sit-down than to go to McDonald's for my family of 3. This might just be local, but where I live, a ton of businesses closed. I mean, half of them were closed. Not just because of the shutdown, they were closed permanently. I think the pandemic was the nail in the coffin for a lot of businesses that were already on the edge of just making it, and others have continued to struggle because, well, things are just more expensive. I've noticed I no longer go to sit-down restaurants because my grocery bills are so expensive. Why go spend $40 to $50 for one meal when it costs $150 to $200 every 2 weeks for groceries? It just doesn't make sense anymore for a lot of people. I think the dining experience changed as a whole post-pandemic. Lots of places had to resort to DoorDash-type businesses to make up for losses, and that in itself has changed the dining experience. No school on snow days. Our town directly said that snow days are a joyful part of childhood and that they would keep snow days. I'm sure it also has to do with the power outages. If some kids don't have power and can't tune in, or if teachers from other towns don't have power and can't teach, but I thought it was a nice sentiment. As a teacher, I can say that it's definitely affected kids in a way that people don't realize. Kids who have had their first year of school, or even second during the pandemic, act quite differently than kids who had a normal introduction to school. Many of them seem to have fewer social skills and higher anxiety than kids from previous years. Completely. I'm a college professor and my wife is a kindergarten teacher. Young people have definitely been affected. There are no more B- to C students, just A's and F's. Whatever it took to buckle down and turn the semester around is not there anymore. The campus is a ghost town. Faculty don't come in when they don't have to. Also a college professor, and I agree that I've seen my colleagues decide not to come in at all, much more often post-pandemic as well. To them, it's easier to stay home to read emails, grade assignments, and meet with students remotely. Part of my job is to remain in person to assist students with media stuff, and I would much rather do it in the office, honestly, for the interaction you talk about. In terms of the students, I've seen higher degrees of burnout before normal times, like after Thanksgiving or spring break, etc. It seems now students start to feel it 3 to 4 weeks into the semester, and it doesn't really stop, it just fluctuates. I even noticed the same among my own colleagues as well, like burnout comes much faster. We were never in this together. I'm in healthcare. We were heroes when needed, but when we weren't, we are flexed off the schedule without pay. I'm sure the office folks that aren't on the floor providing the actual care get paid though. I no longer recommend going into healthcare for anybody. The used car market is completely messed up, as are flight prices. It's scary. I have an older car and I'm one accident away from not being able to afford a new vehicle. Before you could get a decent car for $10K to $15K, and now in the area of the US I live, I saw a 1999 with about 250K miles going for about $12K. Car lots in my area are still upcharging for their cars on their lot. Ford Mavericks, whose base are $19K, are going for about $50K. I have a fairly inexpensive luxury car compared to, say, BMWs, Mercedes, etc. that I bought used with very low mileage, and I was shocked to find out that I could sell it back in late 2021 with 25K more miles on it for more than what I bought it for. I haven't checked lately, but those mid to end 2021 used car prices were completely nuts. The dealership that I bought it from 5 years ago used to send repeated emails asking if I'd be willing to sell it back to them. What the hell? The cost of living is pretty messed up. Food prices just keep going up. We're buying less than ever and more generic/less premium versions of everything, and yet we're paying easily twice as much as the far more luxurious and full carts of groceries we were getting in 2010. Every single time I go to the store, they've raised prices on something. I tend to buy a lot of the same things frequently, so I am able to keep track of prices. I was getting this bag of iceberg lettuce for $2.19 a couple of weeks ago, and they just popped it up to $2.99. That's a crazy jump. I can't afford 90% of the stuff in there anymore. It's like $5 for a can of soup. The soup used to be cheap food that you could stock up on. Now it's a luxury item. Any type of 24/7 business is just a memory. I can't trust the hours of any business on Google anymore. Places just close whenever the hell they want now. I went to go get Taco Bell at 10 p.m. and it was closed. Essential versus non-essential employees, better known as those who had to show up physically in person and those allowed to stay home. Biggest division in the workplace. Mentally, it will never be the same in the workplace. Yes, I am so glad that people had the ability to work from home and still meet their financial needs. I'm so glad that those resources were available, and yet there's no nostalgia for quarantine for the essential workers. It's hard to hear others talk about how they kept themselves busy or took up a new hobby when I can only remember being so overwhelmed and stressed. It feels like it's a more to each their own sense of living. People don't appear to be as connected as before the pandemic. The pandemic brought me so much closer to my wife and son. It also made me incredibly jaded, cynical, and much less trusting of everyone outside of these walls. Many branches of my family come together for Thanksgiving as a tradition. The vibe was totally different for Thanksgiving this year. Everyone was polite and cordial, but you could kind of tell people were ready to get out of there and go their separate ways after 2 to 3 hours, even the kids. In the past, prior COVID, everyone would hang around all day from about midday to late at night. Things have definitely changed. We are all homebodies in our separate houses now, most at peace on our own respective mobile devices. I wasn't raised like this. Independent, smaller, DIY music venues never really recovered. This has really left a void in my life. I used to go to house shows a lot as well, and those are all gone unless it's a college band. I'm hoping it will slowly recover. Speaking of college bands, they're all cover bands now. There are hardly any new musicians playing mostly original music. It's so weird. The lockdowns happened during my last semester of university. I've never had an in-person job, only work from home, which I realize is a blessing but also makes it feel like it's not real. I have no work friends and have never met my supervisor in person. I do all my work from my desk in my room. It feels like pretend. I worked for almost a year during COVID for a company without meeting anyone in person. It was like a really dull video game until I met people. Now it's like a really stressful video game. Sometimes I break eye contact in meetings just to remind myself I'm not there with everybody in the meeting. I'm really alone. I'm in my 40s, but the pandemic really cut the list of friends I socialized with in half. We got out of the habit of seeing one another, and now that things are back to normal, we just made a habit out of not having dinner dates and stuff like that. When I realized this was happening, it made me look back and realize that I was the one who used to plan things and reach out. I made the conscious decision to stop being the one who always reached out, called and texted, and now I see that I'm only in touch with half of the people that I used to be. I'm not talking about socially awkward, depressed, introverted people. If anything, I'm an introvert, and I still always make a point to reach out. I'm referring to people who still go out, celebrate holidays and birthdays and socialize. Just not with me anymore, apparently. There are only so many times I can try to make plans with people who don't do the same as me. I cannot be the one putting 100% into a friendship. The health system is wrecked. Way too many nurses got burnt out and left the profession. My social/work life. After living like a hermit for 2 years and working from home, it's taking me a long time to go out like before. My husband just informed me I hadn't left the house in 4 days. I had no idea. Children's education, mental health, coping skills, and socialization. My wife is an elementary educator, and it's shocking how far kids have regressed during the pandemic. By almost every measure, this generation of kids is in big trouble. I'm optimistic that the trend will right itself over time, but it's really sad to see. People's driving is so out of whack. My only concern is to make it home in one piece. Increased polarization of people politically, socially, and economically. The rich got richer, and the poor got poorer. Like in every financial crisis ever. Young people's desire to go into healthcare. We won't realize it for a generation or so, but healthcare in America was already chronically understaffed. The pandemic burning out medical professionals and discouraging young people from going into healthcare is going to have a negative effect on the quality of healthcare, not only in the United States, but in other hard-hit countries too. Everything just feels off. People are rude, no parties or overnight hangouts, and most people nowadays keep themselves busy on their phones and TikTok. My mental health also took a hit. The time before 2020 feels like a colorful fantasy, while the present one feels like a dystopian world. I found people have really turned inward and are more focused on their own families. For those of us who are single and live alone, the negative impact of that has been huge. Leaving the house. Goes to Subway. I can make a better sandwich at home. Goes to a nail salon. I can paint my nails better than this lady. Goes to a hair salon. I've been cutting my hair solo for 2 years now. I'm a pro. Goes to work. I can do all of this more efficiently at home. Goes to Applebee's. I can provide myself with mediocre service at home. Goes to Walmart. I can order all of this online. Why did I leave the house again? It pushed people away from social gatherings with friends and family and mostly replaced that with screen time. It messed us up socially. We are more alone than ever. I feel like for me, there's an added element that I no longer feel the need or desire to engage in conversations I don't care about. Like all my small talk is gone. I can still do it, but now I'm more likely to allow awkward silences and more often. I can't think of questions to ask or things to talk about. Modern dating. My wife and I started dating 12 years ago, so dating apps weren't really a thing, although I used OkCupid a few times for hookups. But now my single friends tell me what dating is like, and it's a different world. It feels so inorganic. It also feels so transactional, like capitalism of attraction. It's kind of like you used to be able to apply to a job in person and charm your way into a position. Now it's all online and you have to hit certain keywords, avoid certain keywords to even be considered. Dating apps sound like that. The personality doesn't matter so much as the resume. And then it's the phone interview, and if you outcompete the other 6 applicants, you can move on to in-person. It feels like the days of just meeting someone in real life and getting those butterflies that lead to romance, they're gone, replaced with compatibility via 1,000 swipes. The 90s. I would walk 1,000 miles to fall down at your door. Today, I would apathetically swipe 1,000 times for a chance at your compatibility. Children's education, attitude, and manners. As a teacher, there is definitely a noticeable difference after COVID in these things. The attitudes and blatant disrespect are unbelievable. I don't take any of it personally, so it doesn't wear on me so much, but I can absolutely see why some teachers are burnt out because of it. Worker/employee relationships. A lot of people woke up to how crappy a deal we have in the United States, the wealthiest country in the world. No guaranteed sick leave and no parental/maternal leave. We gave big business bailouts, and they still raised prices and fired workers. View on people, their hygiene, and their mental capacity. I started to notice that people cough and sneeze without using their hand or arm and just do it out in the open in a room or hallway full of people, directly at people when they wear a mask. They would remove the mask before sneezing or coughing into the open, all without any remorse or understanding why this would be bad or generally why it would be disgusting, no matter if it's during a pandemic or not. This still happens daily. I still see someone doing it. It's mind-blowing to me, absolutely mind-blowing, considering what we all went through and why. I honestly don't think the majority of Americans especially truly understand how messed up the healthcare system is and is going to be. Not just staff burnout, but we have nationwide back orders on some really key medications, and even things like blood and albumin shortages. There have been times that we've literally just not had the supplies available to give a blood transfusion and have had to resort to alternative treatments for things like seizures because we simply do not have the normal medications available. We have major equipment shortages too. There were several months that we couldn't consistently get Foley catheter kits, and we're having to Frankenstein things together. Currently, the only A-line kits my facility has are the double port ones that we use for swans. Bariatric beds? Good luck finding one. Entire supply chains and production lines have ground to a halt, and staff burnout, staffing shortages, increased patient loads, and deceased equipment, and it's just a domino tower. But most people, not a single clue. Niche retail. There was this really cool place that sold vintage Chanel Hermes 70s pieces. They needed the exploratory foot traffic to survive. COVID killed them. Almost all of my favorite little independent shops are gone. My favorite record/used bookstore, the gourmet cheese place, and the crystal and tarot card shops are gone. My luxury consignment and vintage store did survive, and her prices are still reasonable. The belief that Americans are able to come together in a crisis and be willing to make sacrifices for the greater good. We'll never trust each other again. I agree totally. At the beginning of the pandemic, I thought we would all pull together as a country and get through this. The pandemic taught me that we're not the country I thought we were. We did not pull together. We fractured. The political division has only made it worse. The supply chain is still messed up 6 ways from Sunday, with no sign of returning to normal anytime in the near future. My sense of purpose or meaning. I haven't felt this nihilistic since I was a brooding teenage girl. 20 years later, and now it's actually more of an existential hell. This is in relation to actual virus, plus politics, plus societal response. People are just mean. Most people have careers and work at companies that, if either disappeared tomorrow, the only suffering would be from the employees without salaries anymore. People's ability to drive. Drivers are far more aggressive post-COVID, and even fewer people are using their signals. When you combine social media with a global pandemic, it forces us all to realize people don't suffer equally. In the age before social media, we could rely on tradition or culture to justify sacrificing to come together. Nowadays, we must be guarded to not be exploited. People's life plans. We lost almost 2 years of our lives. I should have been in a much different place by now, but COVID ruined my opportunities, and now I feel like I'm behind by 2 years. Yes, from 2019 through early March 2020, I had been interviewing for my dream job, socializing more, developing hobbies, going out of my comfort zone and trying new things, and had even lost 20 pounds. The pandemic took all of that away, burnt me out, feels like I've stalled out in my career, I gained the weight back and then some, developed some new health issues, and now struggle with having the energy to do more than the barest minimums. It sucks. Faith in humanity. Sobriety. I got sober pre-pandemic and I'm really glad I did. I would have drunk myself to death during COVID if I hadn't. 3 years sober on December 8th. The sense of security. I never know what's around the corner anymore. It's terrifying. Casual hugging, buffet dining, and general trust in people. Trust? I don't trust anyone anymore. I learned that people are even dumber than my cynical brain ever imagined. Personally, I'm not as soft as I used to be, and I'm not as open with others. I don't trust people the same way. I am taken aback when someone other than my family wants to hug me because we went so long without human connection. I was really lucky during the pandemic because my whole family and I stayed healthy, but there were lots of things put on hold that started to alter my path mentally, and ultimately who I was as a person. I started seeing things I didn't like in people based on how they treated others during that really tough time. I saw the job that I thought was my dream job become very toxic. I feel like I was a lot more optimistic before the pandemic, and while I'm not pessimistic now, I am very cautious and wary in a way I never was before. For me, it was my sense of self. I can hardly recall the person I used to be before the pandemic. My social skills took a massive hit and I became an anxious, self-deprecating mess. My hobbies have dramatically changed and I sometimes struggle to remember what I liked before consuming a crap ton of pandemic media. Things are getting better. Finishing high school and getting a job helped improve my social skills and emotional well-being. But I'm never gonna even get a smidge back to whoever I was before everything suddenly stopped. Handshakes. It's all awkward as hell for me now. Supply chain. Just-in-time ordering was a bad idea to begin with, but trying to adapt to the new normal when you are used to full shelves to choose from is almost worse. People's well-being. Well, definitely mine. The feeling of dread at the beginning of the global pandemic has never really left me. Funerals and hospital visits. You need closure, and COVID took that away. The illusion that people actually care about people they don't know. Young children's socialization skills. Empathy. Most people no longer have it, or they finally stopped pretending. Being in crowds now gives me more anxiety, for me at least. Food delivery. Fees on fees, and the menu prices are more expensive in the apps. Yes, it's a convenience and you are paying for it, but it's expensive. Then you play the tipping roulette game. Leave a good tip and your order still might be late. Wrong or missing items, etc. Want a tip after you get your food so you don't leave a tip beforehand? You ain't getting your food. Mental health. The new standard is being on meds for something. Restaurants in NYC closing at 10 p.m. RIP city that never sleeps. How politically fueled public health is in the United States. Empathy. Everyone is so bitter and cruel, it's terrifying. Movie theaters. That genie ain't going back in the bottle. Okay, so my options are get dressed, drive to a theater, the closest theater to me is about 20 minutes, spend upwards of $100 for a family of 4, not including overpriced concessions, sit in a seat where I have no idea how clean it is, hoping no crying baby, cell phone talker, mouth breather, or other loud person sits near me, sit through commercials, watch the movie without being able to pause it to go to the bathroom, then drive back home. Or not do any of that and just watch the movie. Now, before anyone freaks out, no, I don't think movie theaters are going away entirely, nor should they, but they will not be the default way of watching a generic wide-release movie. People who had COVID. I feel like the long-term physical effects. I am tired all the time. And sure, there are definitely other factors that could be at play, but the effects of long COVID definitely have messed me up. Live music. This question answers my problem. Before the pandemic, I was a very outgoing student, volunteering to do stuff and answering many questions. After 2 years of online studying, I seem to stop that outgoing persona and keep stuff to myself more. Maybe it's because I was just 13 to 14 years old back then, or I met many new classmates, but it was a lot harder to socialize when I first met these new classmates. I almost went crazy during the pandemic. Mental health was so low back then, kind of bitter that some people had the opportunity to treat the pandemic like one long vacation. It was a fight for survival for me. Our entire social construct. It's apparent that the rich got richer and the average person can't keep up. There needs to be some sort of reckoning with these corporations and the super wealthy. My ability to make small talk is gone. When I go to the office now, I have no idea how to talk to people. Common decency. People don't remember how to treat other people, have tact or empathy, or even understand the concept that other people are actually real. The level of entitled rudeness is amazing. Everyone is at 12 on the rage meter and absolutely can't wait to throw a tantrum that would embarrass a 3-year-old at the smallest provocation. A sad time to be a human. Relationships. I've lost a ton of respect for the people I once loved. Before COVID, I used to cough to cover up a fart. Now I fart to cover up a cough. Human sanity and logic. Permanently ruined the purpose of an urgent care and emergency department. When primary care physicians stopped seeing patients for over a year, if anyone had any symptoms of COVID, the ED and UC were overrun with chronically ill patients who needed care. Obviously, it was an issue before COVID, but it is so much worse now and will continue to be an issue and a crisis. Don't get me started on the American healthcare system as a whole. Social aptitude, children's education, technological morals, small business, the overall economy, international skepticism, the list goes on and on. Friendships, in my opinion. I lost one of my best friends and barely talked to the other in the same year because we barely communicated during the pandemic. They soon found new friends and began to forget about me. My calls were rejected a few times just because they were on the phone with their new friends. I also tried to find some new friends, but couldn't since I'm bad at making them. Spent the pandemic playing games and doing nothing. We got back to school a few months after that, and what made things worse was most of us were in different classrooms and we have our break in the classroom, which would mean that we could not eat together like we used to. Us. We saw people take off their facade and show who they really were, what someone else here called the sham of society. Turns out that when people are scared, lied to, and abandoned by their leaders, a lot of us turn frickin' nasty. It did not have to be this way, but here we are. My respect for so many people I no longer respect. My financials. Pre-pandemic it was tight, but every few months or so I got some fun money. Now it's week to week. I may never recover. The world has gone crazy. I no longer have the desire to get on a plane and travel. Pre-pandemic, I looked forward to traveling for work or pleasure. Now the idea of getting on a plane makes me anxious. Helping others in need. Like it brought back the bystander effect when this person was literally just choking. I found people aren't as caring and friendly towards each other anymore. I suppose social distancing and issues of who's vaccinated and who's not have taken their toll. Basic manners. Manners and treating people the way that you want to be treated. I feel like people treat retail workers and employees of businesses any way they wish with no repercussions. People are far more selfish and only care about themselves. Verbal communication skills. So many of us spent so much time alone. School. I was a teacher for 13 years and planned to do it forever. Teaching was a source of meaning and purpose and a major part of my identity. I loved what I did and was so proud of the relationships I built with students and the things my kids achieved. At the end of the last school year, I resigned. I just can't do it anymore. Last year, I started off hopeful that even if things were tough, at least I'd be back in the same room as my students, and that would be good. It was not good. Last school year broke me. Honestly, I can't even talk about it because it's still too raw. Yes, I'm in therapy, and I take a nice combination of psych meds. From staying in touch with friends, still teaching, things aren't really any better this year. I know other teachers who have left the profession or are looking for a way out. I hope this is just sample bias, but that's not the sense I get from lurking around on the internet. Education is so foundational to a functioning society that if we can't unbreak it, we are pretty hosed. I hope we can figure it out. The casual joy I'd find in everyday life. What is the dumbest reason someone got mad at you? My son got mad at me when I put apple chunks in his oatmeal after he asked for apple chunks in his oatmeal. Best case of toddler rage I've ever heard of. The kid started wailing because he didn't want a banana that wasn't being offered. My niece completely lost her mind recently when we called her by her first, middle, and last name. She didn't know she had a middle name and just couldn't cope. Then my daughter started sympathy crying. We just wanted to eat dinner. My wife occasionally wakes up mad at me based on something I did to piss her off in her dreams. I accidentally elbowed the crap out of our dog the other night because I was dreaming that my husband was cheating on me right in front of my face with no remorse. I cuddled the crap out of him once I realized it was a dream. Made me feel a ton better. Also hugged on my pup for a bit. Teacher threw me out of class in high school when I answered a question correctly after she thought I was sleeping in class. Still bothers me to this day. Get lost, Mrs. Forrester. My Latin teacher once went on a rant in front of the class about me doing well in tests, despite blatantly not putting any effort in. I didn't actually get to witness the rant in person because I was skiving off that day. I heard about it from friends. The teacher actually made me publicly retake a test that I made too high on and obviously cheated because I never paid attention in class. Retook it and made 100%. To this day, like one of the top 5 things I'm most proud of. A woman screamed at me because I wouldn't return a heavily used toaster she purchased 5 years ago at a store that doesn't even exist in Canada. I do not work at a place that sells toasters. This total stranger at a bus stop. He sneezed and I said, "Bless you." He replied angrily, "That wasn't a sneeze, it was a cough." And I said, "Sorry, I thought it was a sneeze." And he yelled, "Well, it wasn't." He was angry out of all proportion. I got death threats at work when I wouldn't accept a box of reptiles as payment for an electric guitar. The guy was later banned from the mall after trying to steal shoes from a mannequin. A girl that I'm friends with on Facebook always posts romantic, cheesy memes, and her husband always replies with like, "Oh baby, I love you more than words can say," etc. One day she posted some cheesy pic of a couple hugging with the words, "A real man knows there is no wrong time to squeeze his girl." So I commented, "Unless she has a broken rib, that'd be the wrong time." They both legitimately got so mad at me and tried to insult me by saying, "Well, you obviously aren't very romantic." My sister got mad at me for pointing out that she stole from an orphanage. Apparently, I made the fact that she stole from an orphanage sound bad. My husband and I went on a 5th-year anniversary trip. 2 people were mad at us for not inviting them. His brother was one of them. Those same 2 people were mad because we went on our honeymoon and didn't invite them. Well, there is just something wrong with them. I know! Who doesn't invite their brother and neighbor on their honeymoon and anniversary holiday? Rude. A coworker was angry with me because I called in sick from work. She wouldn't talk to me for 2 days, so I finally asked what her problem was. She said, "Well, I was feeling really sick and was going to call off too, but didn't. And I never take a day off sick, so it's kind of unfair that you did." What? I didn't put a smiley face at the end of a good night text. Someone got mad at me because I didn't get mad when I lost a game. I had a teacher get mad at me because I sneezed during a test. Same thing, but mine was a nosebleed and a sub-teacher threatened to invalidate my test. I have horrible seasonal allergies that cause bleeding like every day. Driving around with my BFF and I realize she is fuming. I have no idea why she is mad at me. I get mad at her for being mad. We get to her house and slam the doors and sigh exaggeratedly. Finally, she yells, "Why are you mad at me?" "Because you're mad at me." Yeah, we both thought the other person was mad for no reason when really we both were. Years and years ago, I was standing in line with a friend, getting some awful fast food. For context, I am Caucasian and my friend is of Chinese descent. We live in Canada. End of context. So we were waiting in line when a very animated lady of some kind of Asian descent started talking to my friend in whatever language she spoke from her country of origin. While my friend understands the Chinese dialect that her family speaks, she doesn't understand this woman and tells her so. You would have thought that we had just stabbed her. The lady started screaming in English that my friend was a disgrace to her people and that I was the devil girl influencing her away from her people. It was bad enough that the manager asked her to leave. I have never understood that one. She was in a burger joint in Canada, but expected anyone who maybe looked like her a tiny bit to converse with her in her native language. I have a similar story. For context, I am Asian but not Chinese. I live in Canada. I was working on my car late at night in my garage, and I had the door open for ventilation. A middle-aged Chinese guy walked up to me and started rapidly talking in Mandarin. I had limited knowledge of Mandarin, but I needed words to be spoken out slowly for me to understand. It was hopeless. My first thought was to get him out of the house. Even though he didn't look very threatening, it was a really awkward invasion of privacy. But all attempts to talk to this guy in English were futile. He would just pause for a bit, then keep talking. So in my very rudimentary Mandarin, I told him I wasn't Chinese. He looked like I just killed his children and then stormed off. I work at one of the world's busiest theme parks, and today a guest screamed at me because I wouldn't let their toddler on a roller coaster that they would literally fall out of. Then she continued to tug on my shirt and asked what I would give her for compensation. When I tried to give her a pass to enter another ride, she got even angrier and demanded I give her one to a brand new ride that just opened and had a 7-hour queue. After I explained that I couldn't because those tickets don't even exist, she got in my face, screamed again, and demanded I give her tickets to our competitor's park. After explaining I couldn't because our company doesn't own that park, she asked me what time I was finished work and told me she'd find me in the parking lot. All this because I wouldn't let her toddler go on a ride that they would have slipped out of. Me and my siblings used to get mad at each other for staring out of each other's windows on car rides. It sucked for the middle seater. One of my coworkers got mad at me for wearing skinny jeans to a company picnic. He had married a woman half his age and had her convinced that his drink gut was a natural response to aging and slowing metabolism. Well, I'm even older than him, so the wife saw through the lie, put him on a diet, and now I get the blame. I moved a book that was on my best friend's desk in 6th grade, just nudged it a little. She didn't talk to me for 6 whole months. A woman I had never met or seen in my life at a public event asked me where her kids were. I was confused and said, "I'm sorry, I don't know," and she yelled and asked where they put them. She stormed off, angry at me. I never had a clue why she asked me. I had plans on one particular night and my 2 closest friends asked if I was busy. I told them I had plans that night but could do something the next day. They proceeded to throw a fit because I refused to cancel my plans. I was already on the way there, and our argument resulted in us not talking for a weekend. This situation was recurring, but I usually gave in. I realized how much better off I was without the burden of people who got jealous or offended or whatever they were easily, and have talked to them sparingly since. That kid stole my phone. Met him once at my house at a party I threw. He loses his phone. In his eyes, that meant I stole his phone. Except when he told his friends I stole his phone, he did it by texting him using the phone he claimed I stole. Holy crap, that took me for a ride when it first happened. A few years ago, my wife and I found a random phone lying around. Wanting to do the right thing, we started texting people in the contacts trying to find the owner. We finally get to the owner and she keeps insisting we're trying to ransom it, and she won't pay us. We repeatedly told her we didn't want anything, just let us know where we could drop it off. She keeps going back to the imaginary ransom that we never mentioned and how she's contacting the authorities, and we're going to pay for what we did. After 2 days of stupid crap, I said, to hell with it and tossed it on the train tracks and watched a train run over it. One time, an unknown number called me and I answered because the area code was from my home state. This lady screamed at me saying I had her phone and that she was going to lose her job if she didn't get it back. I calmly explained that it was my phone and that I was out of state. She continued to freak out until the voice in the background said, "I think you called the wrong number." She immediately hung up. I was highly amused. We were out of chicken wings at my work. I'm the bartender. This happens quite often actually. Flabbergasts me every time. In the early 80s, my parents bought a home stereo. The face of it had a gaudy fluorescent orange paper sticker around the remote sensor that said "Remote Control Ready." Its sole purpose was as a shelf taker for the store demo models and was meant to be removed by the end user. The thing was a few years old and the cheap uncoated paper had become soiled. So one day, while I was listening to music, I peeled it off. My mom got super mad about this for some reason. My sister got mad at me for helping my niece, her daughter, and my niece's infant son move out of the house that she was giving up to the bank. My sister wanted them to move into a trailer parked at her house, but my niece found a really good house sharing situation. My sister hasn't spoke to me since and told mutual relations/friends that if they talked to me she would not speak to them either. She's a control freak. I folded the towels wrong. My mom has a very specific way she likes the towels folded. And when I was a kid/teen, if all the towels in the closet weren't properly folded, she'd pull them all out, and I had to fold every single one correctly. I could probably write a book just listening to the dumb things that she used to get mad about, but this is the one I always mention to people because it's just such a ridiculous thing. Mine got mad at me for wearing black. So while I was at school, she burned all but like 2 pieces of black clothing. She also got mad at me for the hair in my eyes, so she cut it off so short that the only way to fix it was to cut it down to 1 inch long. I was a 14-year-old girl. That went over well in school. And here I was thinking I was the only one who had a mom who burned or destroyed their clothes. For me, it was all my boy clothes and non-form-fitting clothes. I wasn't allowed to get my hair cut. She chose the style and color, and I went on vacation with my older brother, and he took me to get my hair cut in a pixie cut. She and my dad were so mad. They still bring it up. I was 14 too. Dang, what is up with these people? I was walking in a completely empty area in school except for one other person. She was walking right toward me, not looking where she was going. I tried to move out of the way, but she still ended up bumping me with the hand that she was carrying her water bottle in. It fell on the floor, and then she glared at me for what was clearly her fault. My ex got mad at me that I didn't get her a birthday card while we were in the car on the way to Nashville for the weekend for her birthday. Needless to say, that relationship didn't last much longer. My ex got mad I didn't get her a birthday card on the flight to Vegas for 5 days, all of which I paid for. The relationship didn't last much longer after that either. My wife had a dream where I got a second wife. She was mad at me for a week. My boyfriend had a dream I cheated on him. I spent all day convincing him I wasn't. Been there, except my girlfriend had a dream that she cheated on me and got upset at me for not being upset at her for dreaming about cheating on me because it was just a dream, right? Most mornings are already pretty confusing times for me. This did not help. I retweeted a quote, and someone on Twitter went on a 20-tweet tirade at me for buying him a video game at full price. Because I didn't come during sex. Still baffles me how he managed to turn that around into a huge argument that ended in silent treatment for the night. One of my bridesmaids is mad at me because she is going to my wedding instead of the weekend concert. So there's that, lol. Kick her out of the wedding. Problem solved. A very good friend of mine got mad at me because I'm thin. So there you go. Watching Final Destination 3 with my ex, me hugging her head on my chest, and the scene with the girls dying in the tanning beds comes on. They are naked and my ex lifted her head up and punched me and then moved away from me. I asked what that was for, and apparently my heart had sped up at the naked girls on screen. I didn't have the heart to apologize for my autonomic functions. I found out that he had a crush on some girl that I've never even heard of. Just suddenly, he wouldn't speak to me at all. I'd try to ask what was wrong, and he'd just pretend I wasn't there. I asked his best friend if he had any clue what was going on, and he had no idea either. About a month later, we ended up having to partner up in a game, and he finally told me. I was like, "That's it? You won't speak to me because I know you have a crush on someone?" I apologized because I wasn't sure what else to say. After that, we were friends again. A teacher sent me out of class for arguing with her when she said Anne Frank survived the Holocaust. Her reasoning was, how could we have her diary if she died? I was on my class's camping trip in college, and on the last day we drove through town and the driver decided to treat us and buy us cupcakes. I decided to pick the chocolate coffee cupcake. Some random girl I met on the trip decided to berate me on my life choices and how caffeine is against the school and the church rules, and threatened to report me to the school to have me expelled unless I picked a different flavor. It was the best tasting chocolate coffee cupcake I ever had. For adding a haha to the end of a text to her. Needless to say, that friendship was over in a heartbeat. My mom randomly texted me at work and asked if I had Amazon Prime. I said yeah. She asked for my username and password. I said no, I don't give anybody any of my credentials as a matter of personal security, but I'll be happy to order whatever for you. She got really mad and said that I was being disrespectful and couldn't believe that I didn't trust her. Wouldn't talk to me or even look at me for a few days. She got over it. She's otherwise totally normal. My little brother cried when I tried changing his diaper, so my older brother threatened to fight me. My mom got mad at me because I couldn't find the thing on that thing. That's what she said exactly. My girlfriend was hangry and I had just eaten. She got mad at me because she couldn't decide what she wanted to eat. My wife used to do this fairly often early on when we were dating and living together. After a few times of waiting for her to decide, I would just give her a couple of minutes to decide, and if she couldn't, I'd go make what I wanted to make and eat it right in front of her. She got insanely mad a few times, but quickly realized that it didn't affect me and that I wasn't going to put up with that crap. Now she either decides quickly or just eats what I cooked. Jumping over a puddle in first grade. I even got lunch detention. Apparently it's a safety hazard. Who would have thought? Puddles are dangerous. I actually did pass out face down in one in high school. No one was there, it was a weekend, and I was late for a band competition and missed every one. Luckily, some guy was teaching his kid to ride a bike and found me. I came to in an ambulance. My ex got furious with me for taking the butter out of a box incorrectly. Even her mother made fun of her after that. I had an ex-girlfriend get mad at me for paying the bill once at a restaurant. She said she can pay for her own stuff. She was about $3,000 in credit card debt and had recently received a speeding ticket, and had just received a cut in pay. In my mind, I thought I was taking care of her. I didn't know I was rubbing her the wrong way for some reason. She yelled at me in public, threw her keys at me, and told me to drive myself home. Except that we were in her car, so I drove to her house and then walked home. Then she got mad at me that I walked home. LOL. Needless to say, I dodged a bullet bill and a blue shell on that one. Because I naturally remain calm and logical during arguments. The more heated the other person gets, the calmer I am. It's infuriating to people, and I am often the victim of people intentionally being very rude and hurtful to try and get a rise out of me. Had a friend who got mad at me because she thought I liked her baby more than I liked her. Postnatal depression. Fairly common for new moms in the months after a baby is born to get depressed, even if they haven't had symptoms before. It wears off eventually, but the first part is particularly rough. Ex-GF didn't talk to me for 2 days because I cheated on her in a dream that she had. My dog died and I was sad about it. She was mad that I was being clingy, so she broke up with me. Well, recently, a girl got mad at me for replying to her messages too fast. I am on my phone, doing things, and the messages pop up on my friggin' screen. WTF am I supposed to do? One time, my grandpa legitimately threw a fit because I slept in till 8 a.m. on a Saturday. You gotta wake up when the sun first rises to get the most out of your day. My sister got mad at me for telling her mermaids don't exist. She's 21. My ex was extremely controlling and emotionally abusive, so if I didn't text back quickly enough or call him or answer the phone when he expected me to, he would throw a fit. I think the biggest one though, we were out shopping because he needed new pants, and I saw the cutest gay couple. I posted something about it on my Twitter account, an account I'd had for years and didn't think to tell him about because it just wasn't a thing to me. That caused a 3-day fight because I was hiding things from him and not being honest, even though when he asked, he could easily see it was me fangirling over bands 90% of the time, and the other 10% was just me being my normal weird self. I still have weird anxiety issues over it today. I'm a referee at youth soccer games. This one time, a coach almost ran into the field fuming because I called for a foul of one of their players. The foul was a tackle from the back with 2 stretched out legs. Coach's argument? The person who got tackled was a girl. My niece blew up on me in front of the whole family because I was eating a candy bar before dinner. This one might not count, but here we go. I was working at the Cult of Dave Thomas, or Wendy's, at the back window collecting money and washing dishes. That's it. I wasn't taking orders, just taking the monies. A man pulls up to the window in his red top-down convertible and asks me, "Why do I have to tell you how to do your job?" I have no idea what he's talking about. It turns out that he ordered a burger, fries, and a shake, and the order taker had asked, "Do you want that in a combo?" instead of just doing it. The guy was really upset. As I said, I had no idea what he was talking about, so I basically said, "Huh?" And he repeated himself, way more upset this time, I think, insulting my mediocre intelligence. I just turned and got my manager, who refused him service. He drove to Burger King across the street. My manager looked at me and said, "Some people, right?" Or something to that effect. I still live in the same town and see the guy at my current job. Every time I do, I'm reminded of that incident and I want to find where he works and do the same thing. My ex got extremely mad at me because I didn't tell her how I like my tea. I asked her why she didn't just ask me before making it. When I was in the 5th grade, my best friend got mad at me because I forgot my toothbrush at home when I spent the night at her house. My wife, while pregnant, once threw me out of the house and didn't let me back in until the next morning because she thought I was using too much water while washing the dishes. A girl in a class I had in college once chewed me out because I didn't like some young adult novel. Please say it was Twilight. My sister once yelled, "You're so un-American," for saying the show Friends sucks. Not me, but one time while I was a kid and having a sleepover and playing video games with my friends, my dad walked in and asked if we wanted to order pizza. Us being young boys, of course we did. So my father asked what we wanted on the pizza and my friend replied, "Pineapple." I'm not sure why, but my father took legitimate personal offense to this. He began to yell at my friend until he was near tears. Pineapple pizza. My friends know I work nights and sleep afterward in the morning to afternoon. My friends made plans to hang out through text while I was sleeping. They got mad at me because I didn't show up. They knew that I had worked that night, but expected me not to sleep after a 12-hour shift. Didn't finish my homework so my friend could copy it. That friend eventually failed and left the private school that we were in. Also, the same person got extremely mad at me since I suggested that he should stop biting his nails, which made them look like he barely had any, probably because we were surrounded by many others, and he didn't like the attention he was getting for his nails. My ex would always try to make me jealous and angry. Whenever she succeeded, she got mad that I was jealous and angry. When I was 15, a buddy and I got really into fitness. After a few months of gym time, a girl calls me and says, "Heard you're getting a six-pack." I responded with, "No, why?" She then proceeded to yell, "Get lost," and hung up. A few years ago, my mom got a new job with a lesser salary and we had to adjust to the new normal. It was stressing my mom out because she had to rework her budget and crap was tight, too tight. This put my mom on edge, and we started getting into arguments about everything. The final straw was when my mom got angry because I corrected her when she said that Michael Keaton was the first Batman. When she started yelling at me, I just calmly said, "You realize we're arguing about Batman, right?" That was 2 years ago, and I'm happy to say we haven't had any dumb arguments since. She got mad at me because the guy she was into liked me, even though I didn't like him back. Girls are dumb and evil to each other. At the start of one memorable Girl Scouts meeting, 2 of us girls were tasked with making drinks for the rest of the group. Shelly and I headed into the scout leader's kitchen, got out a pitcher, a long wooden spoon, a canister of sugar, and since it was the 80s, a packet of Kool-Aid. We divvied up the operation so that I would do the mixing and powdering while Shelly would measure out the sugar and water. While Shelly was busy measuring the sugar, I opened the Kool-Aid packet and poured the powder into the pitcher with a little bit of water that she had already measured out. This is when the rage started. She shouted at me, "What are you doing? Are you some kind of idiot? What type of moron puts the powder in first? I'm going to tell on you." I was a bit taken aback and asked her how she did it. In her snottiest princessy 8-year-old voice, she said, "Well, I put the powder and sugar in last." Little me was trying to be helpful and was like, "But if you put the powder and sugar in first with a little bit of water, you don't get all those floaty chunks at the top." That's when she started laying into me about how I was doing it all wrong. Within a few seconds, I had had enough of the yelling and decided to go outside and leave her and the unfinished Kool-Aid behind. Unfortunately, Shelly followed me, slamming the screen door in the process, and continued to shout about how I was too incompetent to mix the drink properly. I just started walking off the property when the leader came out to see what was going on. I told her Shelly was screaming at me about making the Kool-Aid wrong and I wanted to call my mom to come pick me up. That's when the leader looked at me and said, "You must have done something to make my daughter yell at you. She's never like this." The penny dropped. I hadn't realized they were related. Knowing there was now no way to win this one, I asked again if I could call my mom to come pick me up, and then sat on the curb until my mom arrived. Let's just say I never went back to any Girl Scouts meetings. What ruined your Thanksgiving this year? Went to go pick up my grandma from her dementia care home today, and as soon as I pulled in, she called and said she wasn't feeling well. I ended up sitting with her for an hour catching up. When it got dark, I had to go, and she begged me to stay and gave me some food. I wanted to cry. She was asking me all these things about my life I couldn't give her the answers to. I miss when she was a part of my life and not away spending her last days isolated. Dementia sucks badly. It's horrible to have to go through. I feel you. We brought my grandmother over from her care home today to let her enjoy my kids, great-grandkids. My dad said when they were pulling out of the driveway, she started crying and said she wished she could have just gotten to spend some time with them and had some hugs. She didn't remember in that 3-minute span that my 3-year-old didn't leave her side the entire time, and that my 9-year-old sat on the couch and snuggled her and translated conversations from across the room for her for an hour. Dementia is awful. 2 weeks ago, my dad and grandma died 2 days apart from their respective cancers. Also today, I have a 103-degree fever, so I can't even be around my family. My sister, whose house it was at, had an edible before the food was even ready and then retreated to her room due to being too high and started hinting for people to leave. She's going to be sad when she emerges and she doesn't have any leftovers to munchie. Tooth infection that spread. Went to the dentist yesterday to get antibiotics and it ballooned across my face overnight. So here I am sitting in the ER triage with a 101.3 fever and a face that hurts like hell. I had a tooth infection that took my front tooth this year. The loss of the tooth and subsequent surgeries ruined my Thanksgiving. It stemmed from an accident as a kid. I'm so sorry you're going through this, and I can level. I'm sending you love, sweet person. I'm sorry you have to endure this too. A severe ulcerative colitis flare landed me in the hospital 2 days ago. I'm still here, and tonight's Thanksgiving feast, 1 gallon of colonoscopy prep. My husband and I were in a pretty bad car accident Monday afternoon. He ended up with a bad concussion and staples in the side of his head. I have a total of 13 stitches in my right hand and wrist, not to mention all the bruising, whiplash, and everything else that comes with being rear-ended while at a dead stop by someone most likely doing 45 plus. We're lucky to be alive. We were the first car hit and somehow got pushed into the median, while the car that hit us kept going and ended up hitting the car that was in front of us. There ended up being 5 cars involved in the whole ordeal. We were supposed to go to my in-laws today, but his concussion has made it difficult for him to eat or even sit in a lit room, so we ended up staying home. It sucks, but I'm thankful to be alive, and there's always next year. It wasn't ruined, but it was very boring. It was at dinner at my wife's cousin's, along with a couple of other distant relatives, all people over 65. I ended up eating too much and had fun playing with the dog. Also, I was the only one who got stoned before going. I'm 75. My dog suddenly had a stroke last night after spending 1 hour finding an emergency vet that was open and another hour speeding there. My dog passed away at 1:50 a.m., right as we were about to carry her to the exam room. She was perfectly fine just 6 hours before. My first child is in the NICU. We heard the cafe would be serving turkey, but it was closed, so we had a bagel instead. Honestly though, it didn't ruin it at all. He's likely coming home tomorrow and bagels aren't bad. We got to hold him and this might actually be my favorite Thanksgiving. My girlfriend broke up with me last night, so I've been spending the entire Thanksgiving trying to act like it doesn't bother me. Finding out my grandma died from an Instagram post. Nobody in my family bothered to call me to let me know she was even sick. Big dinner, turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, cornbread, the whole 9 yards. A colleague's daughter says she has a stomachache and doesn't feel well. My gut feeling is making me suspicious. We sit down, she gets up and proceeds to vomit all over the floor. Thankfully, she missed the table. Just all on the floor. Poor kid had a stomach virus she didn't know about. She didn't eat much after that. We spent 10 minutes cleaning it up. Sadly, nobody wanted to have the stuffing after that. I was sad because it was amazing. My grandma passing on Tuesday. Thanksgiving was always a wonderful memory with her. We thought Thanksgiving was ruined, but it turns out it will be just different than what we wanted. My grandpa was diagnosed with terminal cancer last summer. We knew this would likely be his last Thanksgiving with us. A few days ago, he had a stroke and we didn't think he'd be able to join us for Thanksgiving dinner since he's still in the hospital. Luckily enough, he's being discharged in an hour and will be able to have dinner with us. Not having my mom around to celebrate. A bunch of people who wouldn't get out of my damn kitchen. Because I'm a guy, although old women think I can't do anything. Well, Mima, we still got 3 pounds of your dry-ass potatoes, but nothing I made has leftovers. I asked for the address and never got a response. Responds 4 hours later, okay, well, we already ate and everyone left, so just stay home and eat there. Go on Instagram and see the family pics. Thanks, Dad. That's nice. The dog got out, leading to a 2-hour search and cold dinner. Being alone, my boyfriend is working. This is the first year I won't get a phone call from my big brother as he took his own life in June. Holidays and birthdays have been tough this year. At least I have the dogs to help snug away the sad. My relative's dog ate the surface of our pumpkin pie and an entire package of bread rolls. My stepfather is fighting pancreatic cancer and my mother is beyond exhausted and stressed. Ordered pre-made dinners, but this is not a day to celebrate. Did not see my parents this year. My brother is going through a manic episode and is suicidal. He lives out of state with his wife. My dad reacted poorly, so when I tried to calm him down, he started screaming that my brother should just go off himself already so we could all have some peace of mind. This happened 3 days ago, and I said, I'm good not seeing you guys this year. Let's think about what family means to us in our own homes. For any questions, my dad and 2 older brothers have all been diagnosed with bipolar 1, but my dad has severe narcissistic tendencies as well. I'm spending it with my SO's family this year. It's very different but united. Odd for me. So, quick story. I had an assistant manager when I worked at McDonald's that was fun to work for, but she suffered from depression. She had a habit of getting wasted and calling her sister to say she was going to kill herself. Said she had a gun and everything. One night she calls and her sister answers. She says she has the gun pointed at her head and she was going to pull the trigger. Her brother-in-law tells his wife, the sister, to just tell her to do it already, that he is tired of all the drama, etc. My friend pulls the trigger, kills herself right on the phone, and the sister hears it. Yeah. Boyfriend of 3 years, who I was pretty sure I would eventually marry, broke up with me a few weeks ago and said he didn't actually love me. Haven't been eating or sleeping properly since then. Started therapy because I didn't know what else to do. Got told I might have BPD a few days ago. Woke up Tuesday with a sinus infection. My neighbor is unable to come to dinner with us because he's recovering from COVID. I hate that he's spending it alone. He's been spending holidays with us for years. We packed up a few plates for him and brought them over so we got to visit on the porch for a minute, but it's not the same. Even my mom says it's not the same without him. Halfway through eating my first plate, it started to feel like someone punched me in the gut. Damn you, apple cider, damn you. A tradition like no other, the Detroit Lions. Imagine a family tradition where right as you sit down for dinner, you invite some guy over to kick you in the balls. That about sums up the Lions fandom on Thanksgiving. My husband lost his job on Tuesday morning. Needless to say, we're not in the mood to celebrate. I love how companies fire people at the holidays. Gotta make cuts somewhere so the higher-ups can get their fat Christmas bonuses. I announced I was pregnant, and the first thing my aunt said was, "No wonder you look so fat." Kid brought home hand, foot, mouth from daycare. Infected everyone. We were going to host this year, but we had to call it off. My wife needed emergency surgery today or she would have died. Thankfully, she is still alive, for great nurses and skilled surgeons. Slicing my hand open whilst trying to open the damn cranberry sauce. A cold. Spending the day home alone so I don't infect my family. My dad told my brother and me that he should have beat us more as kids. Not having anyone to spend it with. Didn't remove the bag of organs inside the turkey. My mother-in-law took one bite, threw up, and had to stop eating. Now we are all awkwardly sitting around trying to find something entertaining to watch on Netflix. Help! Woke up to $700 in fraudulent charges to my account and couldn't call the bank. On top of being stuck at home, I had something to stress me out even though I know it's easily taken care of. Truly fraudulent charges are thankfully quick to remedy. The bank will give you a temporary credit while they investigate. We just falsely got charged $2,010 for a $10 burger. It took them over 2 weeks to finally fix that one because, well, it's not fraudulent. You said you did eat at this burger place. Although the bank teller acknowledged that would have to have been one heck of a burger. Working a 12-hour shift. My husband and I got into an argument and he's been ignoring me since then. Says he wishes he wasn't spending it with me. This isn't healthy. At worst abusive, at best toxic. My kidneys are in stage 4 failure, starting dialysis, and I'm terrified. Went to my boyfriend's family Thanksgiving for the first time this year. On the way out, I slipped off the first stair into some mud. Definitely one of the more embarrassing things I've done. My dad died almost 3 weeks ago. First holiday without him. Influenza A. We are better now and fever-free and decided to postpone Thanksgiving to Saturday. Everyone agreed, which is nice. Mom decided to have a heart attack last week and passed away, leaving me to cook by myself. Humor helps a bit. My first Thanksgiving without my family because I'm working at my vet clinic this weekend. Watched a dog pass away in a brutal fashion this morning. She was suffering and continued to until her last breath. I couldn't catch the turkey. He's a speedy little bastard. I had to put my cat to sleep. We knew it was coming with her diagnosis of kidney failure, but she took a big turn for the worse, and we put her down yesterday. Our hearts are broken and we just hosted Thanksgiving dinner. I'm so glad the day is over. Found out on Monday my 11-year-old fur baby has cancer, and the vet said there's nothing they can do. She has 2 to 4 months of life left at best. My mother-in-law died 10 minutes before I put the turkey in the oven. My mom invited her ex from way back, who is now a friend. Although thought he was a pretty chill guy, all he ever talked about were the carnival rides he worked on. This year, dinner was punctuated with the following arguments from him. Biden is a fake because his balding pattern changed. Everyone in the White House is Illuminati/Freemason and Biden makes blood sacrifices. When he said, "Well, Michelle Obama is Baphomet," I burst out laughing so hard I had to leave the room. Luckily, my uncle debunked literally everything he said, and it was very funny when he said, "I'm a Freemason. Did you know that?" "Yeah." "Did you?" "Yeah, I did." He later admitted he did not. These were just things I was in the room for, though. My dad died 2 weeks ago. Went to my father-in-law's. No mention of anything regarding my dad, as if it never happened. I'm struggling. I'm home alone sick while the wife and kids are having a great time at her parents' house. The first couple of hours were fine, but now I'm depressed and lonely. Being sick. Not all that bad since I get to chill and watch football, but it sucks to miss out on being around family and gorging on food. A judgmental dietitian who bulldozed the menu. There are 364 other days in the year for health consciousness. Let me have my carbs and sodium. Grandma on a breathing machine from COVID. Tomorrow will probably be the worst day of my life. Finding out the hard way that the in-law family I thought accepted me doesn't acknowledge my and my husband's marriage. Also, one of my brothers-in-law got smashed and hit on me relentlessly. Neo-fascist nephew insisted on bringing his handgun to dinner despite being asked not to. I walked out with my wife and went for a drive. The family was not happy. My dad went into cardiac arrest Saturday night. He's awake now, but there is very likely a ton of damage to vital organs and brain function, as he was without a pulse for a long time. Thankful he is still here with the hope that he recovers enough to still somewhat enjoy the rest of his life. I need a break from people asking me favors. Just a break. I still want to help people. I just need some time off so my mind can heal. If it keeps up, I might just move away from my family. My depression and inability to socialize. TMJ. Hurts to chew too much. My husband is an overworked, low-paid resident. Didn't really ruin it for me, but it did for him, I know. Was supposed to be home at 12. Still at the hospital, and it's 6 p.m. Will probably be there till tomorrow. Nothing. It was great. Mom has early dementia but was spot on for dinner. The turkey was moist and tender. My wife made an awesome squash soup for an appetizer, and we had manageable levels of leftovers thanks to a small turkey. Stomach bug out of nowhere last night. All I've had is Gatorade today. I spent this Thanksgiving without visiting any family or trying to make conversation with relatives. Basically just relaxed at home and made a nice meal for myself. So it was pretty much the best Thanksgiving I've ever had. Chinese restaurants are not open, like many, including myself, assume. Reading the top comments, I realized this is small potatoes, but we didn't have enough mash to go around. Broke up with my long-term partner of 9 years, and I'll be homeless in a few days. I called my mom to wish her a happy Thanksgiving and said she had a dream that I got a lesbian haircut and she was so worried I'd become a lesbian. Nothing like a little homophobia for the holidays. Just got done with an introductory probationary period at a new job. It's a traveling job. No travel for 2 weeks and all work from home. My family knew I was home and were just relentless in getting to me. My ex is so terribly negative, it was the last straw. She complained that the car I gifted my daughter, which she uses free of charge, had crappy tires on them, and she had to walk partly up the driveway. Tires were replaced over the summer and again, free. I pay for the car and the insurance. I lied about having work just to get away from all this BS. On the way, I had a full-blown panic attack. The mixture of work and family stress, I pulled over and needed about 2 hours to collect myself. It was the worst I ever had. Thought I was going to pass out or die. Recovered and spent a glorious day at the zoo and just doing what I wanted to. Read, watched a great documentary on Ralph Lauren. The podcasts on the way home were amazing. Empty highway, I'm loving life. Come home to my mother complaining to me about not working on my yard enough. Wasn't thinking and placed a turkey in the oven that I carved. It had been in the fridge too long because I skipped town. I'm pretty sure I have food poisoning. I'm hoping it's just for 24 hours, because my daughters come over tomorrow for a late Thanksgiving meal I do just for them. Takeaway? I need to manage stress better. Hit the gym harder? I don't know. But that panic attack was 2 hours of hell. Never ever again. As soon as I recover from this food poisoning, I'll research some. Thanksgiving isn't over yet though. Like they always do, my daughters will make it better. Grandma's turkey was tagged wrong and arrived 2 hours later than everyone who starved themselves for it the day before. On the bright side, Grandma paid for 16 pounds of turkey and got 20 pounds of turkey. Also, it's a bit nipply at Grandma's place. Still worth the hugs and time spent with them. My mom hasn't stopped talking in 3 hours. Can't be ruined if you refuse to celebrate it, Taps Temple. It was going all good until my dad started to gaslight me and badmouth me while eating dinner. He was fine a few minutes ago, and then it came out of nowhere. Now my mom's crying in her room because all she wanted was a nice dinner, but it turned into me just being badmouthed for 30 minutes while I ate in silence. Got my period, and I did not get enough sleep. Seeing my granddad's deterioration, mentally and physically. Glad to have spent the time with him, just wish getting old wasn't so brutal for some. COVID, never had it before, and have been traveling for work on probably 30 plane rides this year. No COVID. We go to see a local concert and boom, COVID for both of us. C is for coughing, of which there is a lot. O is for oh my god, what have we finally caught? V is for viral, no crappy R, thank you very much. I is for immobile, I can't even make our lunch. Damn is for damn I'm tired, finish this song yourself. Uncle Ched trying to fry a turkey for the first time. No appetizers, boxed turkey stuffing, some ungodly hybrid of mashed, regular, and sweet potatoes with spinach, cheese, and powdered garlic. Now stuck here while they try to figure out how to use technology. The same thing that ruins every day. PTSD. I think people are just heartless creatures. One kid in the emergency room with a reaction to the flu got home on Thanksgiving when the newborn had symptoms and got sent to urgent care. Pretty all-around terrible week. I still feel sorry for all the families still in the emergency room. Being homeless. Depression. Lower intestinal issues. Food poisoning or virus. I don't know. Started Saturday night and still dealing with it today. Also started a chest cold yesterday. This sucks. COVID. My daughter was supposed to be on Catalina Island, and I was supposed to be meeting my girlfriend's family. My mom generously booked my flight home for Thanksgiving, except she booked it under my maiden name because I got married relatively recently, and she isn't used to my married name yet. We didn't discover the error until she sent me my flight details yesterday afternoon, and it was too late to change the name on the ticket. We had to cancel the flight and there wasn't another flight in the right time frame, so I had to stay home. I actually had a perfectly nice day with my husband and his mom, but I feel really bad for my mom because she's been having a tough time and I wanted to see her. I learned about the death of an acquaintance. Finding out exactly a month ago that my husband of 9 years had been cheating on me over the last 4 to 5 years, trying to make the best of it with my 2-year-old at home. Woke up and hugged my dog. Wife said, "You're disgusting. I can't even look at you right now. I didn't do anything wrong the night before. We're having company over today. I had to go for a run just to feel better and get some perspective. She's feeling bad and just wanted to drag someone else down. But really makes me feel like I don't want to put in the work on her anymore. Toxic at best, abusive at worst." My girlfriend's mom dropped the N-word with the hard R. Gestational diabetes. Being pregnant and not being able to eat hardly any of the food was not super fun. Not being in America with the family. Had a bad asthma attack and couldn't get out of bed for a lack of oxygen. I hate going to the ER or doctors in general. Gave my mom and sister directions on how to make my baked mac and cheese over the phone. Was in and out of sleep all day, and finally mustered the strength to get dressed and say hi to all of the family. Took me almost an hour to do this. They were mostly gone. Haven't eaten a thing today yet, somehow I have no appetite. Writing this from the ER bed where I've been given steroids for lung inflammation, an IV for fluids, and currently waiting for a second breathing treatment. My stubborn ass should have come to the ER last night. Uninvited to the family Thanksgiving due to being trans. Of course, that's not the reason I was given, but we all know the real reason. Sent my son ahead to his aunt's for the week since he's out of school and I'm a single father. I was gonna meet up with them today. Ended up with an abscessed tooth and having to pay the last of my money to get an antibiotic prescription and get it filled. Calling him to tell him and hearing the disappointment broke my heart. This entire year sucks. I lost my sister, 2 uncles, 2 aunts, and 1-month-old nephew, and 1-year-old nephew this year. And all their birthdays and 1-year death anniversary are coming up. Our family tried to think positive today. It's just hard this year. My uncle invited my wife and me to his place to have dinner with his longtime girlfriend's family. I had a really great time. Multi-generational classic Thanksgiving. I brought pies I made from scratch and everything. I had a complete implosion and had to disappear to the deck to cry my ass off. This will be the 3rd year since my mom suddenly died on Christmas Eve. This amazing and warm family welcoming us in with open arms made me remember holidays past before my mom died, and it just broke me. I've been in a horrible mood ever since. I cheered up when I was able to go back in and my pies were very well received, but I've just been sulking since we left. I miss enjoying the holidays. Mariah Carey forcing the moniker Christmas Queen on us after failing to get it copyrighted, then ending the parade lip-syncing to Spotify, not moving while holding a freaking parasol, pushing the arrival of Santa Claus into the closing credits. My general contractor. We should have been in our home by September, but we're still down to the studs and living with my parents. My puppy had to be admitted to the hospital because of an unknown infection causing vomiting and loss of appetite. She's so tiny. Mom bringing her new boyfriend she's barely dated for 2 months. So far he seems like an asshole. I'll never tell her though. She'll have to figure it out on her own. I'm just gonna stop by, eat, crack a few jokes, then go the hell back home. Not last year, but 2 years ago, my parents decided to do sushi. They got the sushi the day before. Was it so bad it messed up this Thanksgiving too? Nothing. I ran into 2 families having trouble with the price of turkey, ham, and all the fixings at Publix yesterday. I had them fill their carts with all they needed and put them in front of me as my wife and I paid. The store manager tried to give me some free gift cards. I told him to pass them on to someone else and help them have a better Thanksgiving holiday with prices where they are right now. Happy Thanksgiving to all, and to all a good night. No spending on credit cards for Black Friday Christmas, people. Be smart and safe. The people affected by the recent shootings/stabbings right before Thanksgiving. I had to explain to my fiance's mom that she shouldn't really be sharing my private health issues with anyone but her son and myself. I made her cry, but this is personal, painful, and private. Loneliness. Being British and in Britain. I wanted turkey. It's my birthday and still dealing with breakup depression from like over 2 months ago, so it's like a mega combo of holiday sadness plus birthday sadness. Just could be better. Grandma passed a few weeks ago. She was the staple of the family, so without her, the family outings seem to be done now. My Thanksgiving dinner was a bowl of ramen and some party mix, topped off with a lot of alcohol. When my ex came to pick up the kids to take to his family's house for the holiday, he told my oldest child that he couldn't go visit his family since he is not blood, and he would have to stay home with me. My ex is the only father my son has ever known. Broke his heart. For context, we went to court recently and my ex is not happy with the judgment. A fresh batch of homemade fudge ready to go in the fridge to cool was dropped face down into the fridge. My ex-boyfriend of about 3 years replied to my "thankful for you, love you" Thanksgiving text by accident with how much he loved and was glad he met someone else. Also, they met over VR cause we're long distance, and he needed someone to hold him over. She's even further away, by the way. OP, I'm so glad we met. You are the love of my life. You are always in my mind. I love everything about you. We were planning on getting married. I broke up with him. Dad, aunt, and uncle talked about the QAnon conspiracy. Literally, while eating dinner, they are talking about a cabal eating children's faces and the commander-in-chief Trump will save the world. Not having one. Damn to being in the UK, Thanksgiving is the best meal ever. I misheard the turkey plans. Looked into frying the turkey. My husband thought I wanted to fry it. So after a series of miscommunications, dinner isn't made and we are in separate corners trying to regroup. I have COVID brain and am terrified I'm losing my mind. I asked him if he is okay, and he said he was tired. I've ruined the holiday and I don't know how to fix it. Being completely and utterly alone. Grandma, who is 92, doesn't want to stop driving and isn't happy we took her keys so she doesn't kill anyone or herself. Not me, but my friend's mom died earlier this year. Then last week, his dad died. Just spent the day working and avoiding anything positive. Seems his holidays will be tainted for a bit. My husband's cooking. Everything was flavorless, burnt, or undercooked. He has no sense of timing, so much of the food was cold. In case you were wondering, he won't let me or my adult daughter cook. Not because he's nice, but because he keeps kosher and doesn't trust us. Yeah, there are control issues and a touch of OCD in there too. And he got snarky with my granddaughter. Just because. I wish we had ordered pizza and just watched movies. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.